This story began when the main character received the immortality system. At that moment, the young guy seemed to be struck by lightning, which could not help but shock him. He immediately assumed that he had been reborn after death, but found it too unlikely, so he quickly changed his guess, believing that he had teleported. The main character began to remember what happened to him before. At first, he saw a fat cat in front of his eyes. By a coincidence, the animal fell right on the guy's head, thereby breaking his neck. It was hard to survive after that. Suddenly, the guy noticed a system window, which presented some of his characteristics. The item that attracted him most was death rating. The main character was not at all happy about this because he didn't even understand where he ended up. He then assumed that he would now have to die constantly. In a fit of anger, the guy decided to test his increased strength, which the system had provided him with. The protagonist was very surprised when he saw the incredible result of his spontaneous strike and now believed that the system was very useful. After that, the guy paid attention to the item's skill points balance. He immediately had questions about what these skills were and what they were needed for. Unfortunately for the protagonist, the system could not answer these questions despite his hopes. The guy realized that in this system there was no guidance for simple beginners, and therefore he would have to die alone. Suddenly he heard the voice of a stranger who was passing nearby. The man saw a guy lying in the middle of the road and began to ask what happened to him, but there was no answer. The main character was very surprised when he realized that it was his lifeless body lying on the ground. He quickly ran up to him and began searching his pockets without attracting unnecessary attention. As soon as the guy found a few coins, he realized that after the resurrection, all his things were copied, so the main character had the idea to die several times in order to accumulate as much money as possible. He was afraid that it could be very painful, but he thought that he had already died once and everything was fine, so he should repeat it. At first, the main character ran at full speed and crashed head-on into a stone wall, causing his skull to crack. He then staged an accident where an unknown man accidentally shot him with a bow. It worked perfectly. The guy also tried to die from gluttony, and for this purpose he began to consume a lot of food without measure. After some time, the main character regretfully realized that despite how hard he died, the system still gave him nothing and even lowered his mortality rating to F rank. Suddenly, the guy found out that he had already completed 4/5 weekly resurrections. He was shocked that such a limitation existed. Then the main character realized with horror that if he accidentally dies after the limited number of resurrections ends, he will no longer be able to resurrect. The guy thought that in his past life he died, and now he had a system, but now he could not allow himself to die again. The main character was very angry and hit the ground with his hand, repeating that he couldn't just die, even if his skills improved. He then believed that there must have been some other way of dying that he could have used to gain a foothold in this world. At that moment, the main character suddenly heard someone loudly fall to their knees in front of someone. The unknown man promised that he would return the money later because now his mother needed it, so he asked to give him a little more time and save his life. The main character, who was watching this scene, was very pleased because he thought that these were the right moments for him. Meanwhile, the second man pushed the debtor away from him and kicked him in the face as punishment. After this, the man left, and the main character approached the debtor, asking him if he needed help in repaying the debt. The man was very surprised by this and immediately asked who the guy was. Chow Mu proudly replied that he was someone who specialized in helping people collect debts. In other words, he was a debt collector. Some time passed. In one of the alleys, loud sounds were suddenly heard, which indicated a brewing conflict. The aggressive man loudly declared that he would not give up any money, even if his interlocutor tried to kill him. Suddenly, a sharp sword appeared right next to the man's face. He was very scared because he did not expect that his interlocutor would take his words so literally. The agitated man turned to the main character and asked who he was and whether he really wanted to kill him. Luckily for him, Chow Mu put away his sword and calmly said that he didn't come for that. Suddenly, the guy put a sword to his throat and said that his ghost would take care of the man. The next moment, blood splashes began to fly around, including hitting the man, who was shocked by what had happened. Thanks to this death, the guy's rating rose to D rank, which could not but please him. A week has passed since then. Late at night, the man who owed money was sleeping peacefully in his bed, not worrying about anything. Suddenly, someone entered his bedroom, clearly with bad intentions. The man felt the presence of a stranger, even in his sleep. In such conditions, he could not continue to sleep peacefully, so he opened his eyes to understand what was happening in his house. The man was shocked when he saw a living guy in front of him who killed himself before his eyes. Chow Mu smiled insidiously and demanded that he give him money. Very soon the work was done, which could not but please the guy. A week later, another amazing thing happened in one of the houses. A caring wife brought medicine to her husband, who was very ill. The man was about to drink the decoction, but it suddenly disappeared somewhere. It turned out that Chow Mu quickly snatched it from the hands of the women in order to drink it. Those present were surprised and even shocked. The main character had no intention of explaining anything and simply showed with a gesture that everything was fine, despite the fact that blood was already coming out of his mouth. Very soon, the boy's lifeless body fell to the floor and a pool of blood began to spread around him. The man immediately realized that his wife wanted to kill him and that he was very angry. The woman asked for mercy and honestly said that the great official of the Southern Gate personally gave her this order. An hour later, the protagonist met the same man in an alley to receive his well-deserved reward. The man cried bitterly because he did not expect the guy to be so selfless, so he asked him not to refuse the reward. Chow Mu had no intention of doing his job for free, but he pretended to accept the money only out of deep respect for the man. Thus, 3 months passed, and now the main character could afford to drink a cup of tea without worrying about his future. Chow Mu enjoyed life and thought that he was dying for others and collecting debts from debtors. Thanks to his abilities, he became famous throughout the city. Moreover, while the guy was dying for others, his rating among the townspeople continued to rise, which could not but please him. After many deaths, the main character's body became noticeably stronger. Now he could stretch his arms up to 500 meters and slightly surpass ordinary people in abilities. The guy even ran at a speed of 10 meters per second. Despite all this, his mortality rating did not rise above rank D. Then the main character suggested that if he wanted to increase his rating, he needed a more large-scale death. He knew that in this world, immortals and martial arts coexisted. In addition, there were many villains in this world that needed to be dealt with in a special way. But Chow Moon should not forget that the resurrected one would not make him younger. He was worried that if he died, the system would also die, so he needed to cultivate, because only then would he be able to find a way out. Suddenly, the main character's thoughts were interrupted by someone's unfamiliar voice, which asked to tell him where he could find a debt collector. It turned out that this voice belonged to a mysterious young girl whose eyes were bandaged with cloth and therefore she used a cane to move. Chow Mu happily replied that the girl had found the one she was looking for, since he was the debt collector. At the same time, the main character thought about how beautiful this stranger was, but he thought that her image was standard for such stories. Without wasting time, the girl began to tell that 6 months ago, Heian Chao's family was destroyed by the Wuji Hui clan, and she was the only one who was able to survive. The girl really wanted to take revenge on her offenders, so she directly asked Chow Mu if he could help her with this. In exchange, the stranger promised to teach the guy the technique of longevity fists, which was the main technique of the Heian Chao family. For a while, Chow Mu didn't even know what to answer. Finally, he suddenly asked the girl if by any chance her last name was Dean. This question momentarily discouraged the stranger. It was one of many quiet days that did not foreshadow anything unusual. The customer loudly called the owner of the counter. The guy was unhappy that the man was selling his goods in such a dirty place. This made the seller very angry. Without letting go of the large, sharp knife, he angrily asked why the guy had come here. The annoying buyer explained that he wanted to evaluate the watermelon. The seller was very unhappy with the provocative behavior of the main character and therefore right now intended to teach him a lesson using his knife. Chow Mu was not at all afraid of this and only confirmed that this man was indeed a martial arts master. The next moment, the protagonist turned to the butcher Zheng and confidently declared that it was he who killed the entire Chow family, and therefore today he will take revenge on him. Then a loud blow was heard, which echoed throughout the market square. Along with this, drops of blood splashed on the sides. It turned out that the blood belonged to Chow Moon. It became clear that the seller had no intention of listening to the accusations of an inadequate client. One stab was enough for the main character to die in the market square right in front of everyone. However, the guy's dying expression indicated that he was not against it. At the same time, the butcher Zheng, realizing what he had just done, tried to quickly hide from the people who accused him of murder and intended to detain him. While all this commotion was happening, no one noticed how a mysterious energy began to emerge from the body of the just-killed guy and rushed into the distance. Not far from the market square, Chow Mu materialized from this energy, and he was unhappy that his death was so painful. Despite this, everything was fine with the main character now, and so he tried to complete his task again. Before this, the guy, of course, did not forget to take all his things from the pockets of the dead man, while simultaneously saying that he expected more rewards from the system. After that, Chow Mu decided to look at his stats and saw that he had received 10 points for his death. But what impressed him most was that his mortality rating had risen to C rank. The guy also noticed that he had the opportunity to spend skill points in order to improve his abilities. So he decided to immediately spend 5 points on mastering the Fist of Immortality. Unfortunately, the main character could not do this yet, because the assessment of his deaths did not meet the standard, so the system distributed points randomly. Chow Mu wasn't too upset about this, because for now, he had the Butcher Jung in mind. The guy decided to let him kill him a few more times in order to earn more points. After this, the main character, without wasting time, went in search of his enemy. At this time, far from the city, a man informed his master that he had lost his temper and killed a child who accused him of exterminating the Chow family. Butcher Jung wrote down on a piece of paper his worries about how the stranger could know about all this, since the entire family was completely destroyed. The man was very afraid that one of his victims might remain alive, and therefore he now urgently needed to get rid of this person. Suddenly, the butcher heard a loud sound behind him, which made him distracted from his thoughts and tense up greatly. The man saw that the same guy he had killed had come to his home and, unable to contain his emotions, began to loudly ask how he had managed to survive. The uninvited guest confidently stated that his name was Chow Jing. He allegedly was Chow Mu's brother, and therefore came here to take revenge on his killer. The next moment, the protagonist fulfilled his role and rushed to meet the Butcher Jung, showing with all his appearance that he intended to kill him right then. The frightened man began to quickly wave his large knife in order to keep the enemy away from him. Suddenly, the knife hit the guy's hand and got stuck in it. Chow Mu was very pleased with this and asked what the man would do next. The guy then assumed that the butcher would want to kill him again, but he was not afraid of this. He only thought about how much pain he was in now, but despite this, he could not give up. Butcher Jing was still scared by the protagonist's behavior and thought that he had problems with his head, so he tried to defend himself against him. The next moment, Chow Mu punched the man in the nose with all his might, causing a stream of blood to spurt out. Despite the powerful blow, the butcher still remained on his feet and said that his opponent was different from the guy he had recently killed and was much more powerful. However, the man was not going to lose this battle and promised himself that next time he would not make such mistakes. 5 minutes later, Chow Mu was hit hard by Butcher Jung, causing him to lose his balance and roll across the floor. The man was breathing heavily, trying to come to his senses after a tough fight, and without looking away, he looked at his opponent waiting for what would happen next. In the end, Chow Jing died. The man thought that this guy was a worthy person and steadfastly walked towards death, but he definitely had problems with his head. Then the scoundrel called the bird that was supposed to deliver his letter, and considering that the situation had changed, decided not to send any messages to his master for now. Suddenly, a piece of a wooden door flew past the butcher's head at great speed, almost injuring him. Immediately after this, the man heard the loud voice of the main character, who said that he would not forgive him and would avenge his brother's death. Butcher Jing was unhappy that he had to fight again, but he decided that since the boy so desperately wanted death, he would give it to him. The next moment, loud sounds began to spread from the inconspicuous forest hut throughout the area, indicating a real battle was taking place inside. After a while, everything became quiet. Butcher Jung Wuxi could hardly stand on his feet, so in order not to fall, he carefully sat down on the floor to rest. The man was breathing heavily and wiping sweat from his face, saying that at his age it was hard to kill young people. The villain looked around to see how many opponents he had managed to defeat and really hoped that he had already finished with all of them. Meanwhile, the main character, hiding in a secluded place, was thinking about how after his 4 deaths, his glasses were removed and he began learning the skill Fist of Immortality. Besides, the guy now only has 1 resurrection left, so ideally he should come back here in a week. But he decided to finish everything today while his opponent was weakened. Chow Mu recalled that in his 4th battle, relying on his skills, he almost managed to match the man, so now he had a good chance of winning. In the end, the main characters decided that the faster he completed this task, the faster he would start a new one. Meanwhile, Butcher Jung looked at the lifeless bodies of his opponents and thought that although these guys looked very similar to each other, each of them was stronger than the previous one. That is why the man was afraid that his next such opponent could equal him in strength and perhaps even win. Having looked around, the scoundrel no longer noticed the presence of strangers and therefore assumed that everything was already over, which could not but please him. Suddenly, Chow Mu appeared behind the man, full of energy and happily denying his opponent's assumption. The man was very scared because of this. Butcher Jing looked at the main character with genuine horror in his eyes, already realizing that this battle would be his last. At that moment, Chow Mu, without holding back his strength, attacked the man and knocked him to the ground with one precise blow. Looking at his opponent, the guy made sure that the Butcher Jing was dead, which meant his task had been successfully completed. After this, the guy did not forget to collect the things that remained in the pockets of his defeated clones. Thanks to this, he became richer by 3 more bags of money. The main character also noticed a letter that the Butcher Jung had not managed to send. He considered that it was excellent evidence that this man had indeed killed the Chow family. Chow Mu couldn't understand the rest of the letter, so he decided to show it to his mysterious client. After some time, the main character slowly walked along the alley of Yangcheng City, heading to the designated place. The guy approached an inconspicuous house and turned to Sister Zhue and told her that he had already returned. Soon the door opened in front of the main character, and a girl met him on the threshold. She stretched out her hand forward to determine who had come to her, because she could not see it. At the same time, the girl asked where Chow Mu had been all this time. Suddenly, Sister Zhue seemed to sharpen her hearing because she heard something strange. The girl was very scared because Chow Mu's voice was very different from how she remembered it, so she could not recognize the guy. The main character did not expect anything else from the blind girl. Still, the guy explained to her that his voice had simply changed. The girl found it hard to believe, so she asked for proof. After thinking for a moment, Chow Mu suddenly asked if the girl's surname was Ding. The thing was that over the last month, the guy had been asking this question constantly, so it was very strong evidence. As soon as Sister Zhue realized that the person in front of her was someone she could trust, she immediately hugged Chow Mu. The main character was very happy with this and believed that this was true happiness. After this, the girl sat the guy down on the sofa in order to talk to him. However, before that, she said that she believed that the main character was someone she knew and trusted. Next, Sister Zhue calmly sat down next to Chow Mun to begin their conversation. The girl said that after the Chow family disappeared, her eyes began to move, which was a sign that the eyes of heaven were about to open. She was also very perceptive, so the guy shouldn't have lied to her. Chow Mu knew about all of this, so now he was only interested in when they would study the continuation of the technique. The girl replied that for this it was enough to just warm up the blood and energy, but this could take several years. To this, the guy replied that he was not going to work just like that, because from the very beginning, they agreed that the girl would teach him the technique. The main character also said that he had almost reached the peak of his strength. Sister Shui praised the boy for his assertiveness, and then suddenly took his hand. The girl decided to check right now whether Chow Mu had enough strength to continue studying her technique. Unexpectedly, Sister Shui accidentally touched Chow Mu's hand. She didn't immediately understand what she had touched, which caused her to be stunned for a moment. The girl quickly came to her senses and abruptly took her hand away from the guy, simultaneously becoming very embarrassed and asking what she had just accidentally touched. Chow Mu quickly calmed her down by saying that it was his hand. The girl was still embarrassed and asked if it was really okay that they cultivated together, even though they had only known each other for a month. After that, she touched the main character's hand again and was delighted, because strength training took a lot of time, and the guy had already really almost reached the limit. Hearing this, the protagonist asked Sister Zhue to teach him something new since she thought he was making great progress. At the same time, the guy thought that the Fist of Immortality was a unique technique of the Chow family. If he brought it to perfection, he would be able to live much longer. He also believed that for him there was only one path to immortality, and therefore he needed to move towards it despite any obstacles. Sister Shura replied that although the boy had shown significant progress, he first needed to fully master the Fist of Immortality, and only then learn something new. Chow Mu claimed that he learned very easily, and the death of the Butcher Jung was proof of that. The girl was shocked when she heard this. The main character continued to say with great pleasure that he not only killed the villain but also got hold of a secret letter, but he could not read it completely because he used tadpole writing when writing it. Hearing this, Sister Zhue said that this was a special code that the Wuji Association used. Now she believed that the guy really killed the butcher, although it seemed impossible. After that, the girl said that since the main character had killed the villain, she would continue his training, so now the guy should come closer and start meditating. Along with this, Sister Shui said that everything tangible around was just an illusion, and one reality arose from many fictions. For half an hour, Chow Mu diligently meditated, but his progress in learning the Immortal Fist skill had not advanced and was only 40%. Seeing this disappointing result, the guy decided that it would be better to rely on systemic rewards than to train himself, because it would be much faster. Suddenly, a girl approached him and holding out some books said that it was a dictionary for encrypted text. She asked him to decipher and read the letter to her. Chao Mu was surprised that the girl could not see anything, but was able to find this book. Because of this, he even began to suspect that she was not actually blind. Now the main character sat down at the table and laid out the letter in front of him and brought the book to work. He soon revealed that the letter stated that Emperor Dian was about to leave the imperial capital on a journey, and that the Wuji Association was therefore preparing to gather its members. The protagonist was shocked when he read that this association intended to kill the emperor. Sister Jue was also shocked and asked when and where this was supposed to happen. Unfortunately, the script was quite illegible, so the protagonist couldn't read it. This was disappointing news for Sister Jue, so she sat down in her seat and began to think about what she had learned. The girl was angry, but she thought that the Wuji Association was quite brave if they really decided to do this. Then the main character asked if this association was really that strong. In response to this, Sister Jue decided to tell why her family was destroyed. It was all about Wu Shengren, who was the second person in the world of martial arts. He founded a martial arts club and destroyed many families and clans that practiced martial arts and stood in his way. This man did not leave other clans at all and therefore did not allow them to increase their influence. The girl continued to say that the Fist of Immortality was a unique skill of the Chao family that Wu Shengren had never managed to master. However, she taught the main character this skill, not so that he would kill the villain. She just wanted the guy to have his wings clipped when he achieved success. The girl sincerely wanted to kill Wu Shengren with her own hands in order to take revenge for the destruction of the Chao family. The main character clearly saw how important this was for Sister Jue, so he did not intend to dissuade her from this idea. Instead, he said with a satisfied smile on his face that he had a plan in which he might be able to join the association. The girl heard this and immediately asked if the guy had gone crazy. She was also interested in why Chao Mun needed to do this. Despite this reaction, the main character was determined, and in order to explain everything to the girl, he abruptly got up from the table. The next moment, the guy confidently declared that he would first join the association and then kill the emperor, and thus the emperor's court and the association would begin to feud. Chao Mu also suggested that if he fails to implement the first option, then he will simply find out what exactly the association has planned and then help the girl take revenge. Sister Shui thought that all this was unrealistic, but the guy continued to think that he could kill the emperor and perhaps his name would go down in history. In addition, the protagonist believed that the association should have had a lot of different skills that he could learn in addition to the Fist of Immortality. That's why Chao Mu thought that his plan was great and that he would come out on top no matter what the outcome. The guy continued to say that since Wu Shunren was very strong and it was almost impossible to kill him, he could at least cause him trouble. Despite all this, Sister Shue was still worried about the main character and was afraid that he might be killed. Chao Mu did not share his secrets and instead confidently replied that the association would not be able to harm him. Hearing this, Sister Jue fell silent and sank into her thoughts, thinking about what she had just heard. She felt that the guy was not lying and was not even excited. However, she was interested in the motives of the main character. The girl understood that now she could only offer him training in the skill Fist of Immortality, which of course was not enough for such a dangerous job. Unexpectedly, Sister Shui guessed that Chao Mu wanted to receive her as a quality reward for his help. These thoughts made the girl very confused. The main character, who was watching his friend from the side, noticed this reaction and therefore asked with confusion what she was thinking about again. The girl, still embarrassed, quickly replied that she felt that she had paid the guy too little for his help, so she was interested in what else she could do for him. Chao Mu thought for a while and then said that in fact Sister Shui could really do something for him. The girl excitedly prepared to listen to what the main character was about to tell her. The next moment, the guy said with a smile that for now it was a secret that he would tell her a little later. Sister Shui was very surprised by this because she didn't even imagine what kind of secret it was. Still, the girl thought that since the main character himself was not afraid of anything, then she shouldn't worry about him. Suddenly, the guy asked his friend if she knew any of the association's representatives who lived in the area. Surprisingly, the girl actually knew one such person. It was Guo Yan, who was the representative of Yancheng. Suddenly, a whip struck the unknown man's back hard. The pain was so severe that it made it difficult to breathe. Another man even suffered the same fate. It was unclear what these unfortunate people were guilty of. The whole square was filled with the sound of loud whips and the cries of people asking the master to spare them. Master Guo was watching all this from horseback. The man who skillfully wielded the whip with a satisfied smile demanded that people not stand in the way of Mr. Go. Suddenly, something caught the attention and interested the gentleman. This made him momentarily dumbfounded. He noticed one of the men in the crowd, whom he considered very cute, and so he demanded that he come over to him. The girl was armed with a sword and was not going to obey, saying that she would not please the scoundrel even when she was on the verge of death. The man standing next to her supported her in this. Suddenly, someone grabbed the rebellious guy tightly by the arm so that he could not use his weapon. The two bald men insisted that the boy approach Mr. Go as he was ordered. The girl was shocked when she realized that the scoundrel only wanted the guy to come up to him. The guy himself was depressed and did not want to discuss it. However, he escaped from the bald men's grip, not intending to obey them. The girl also decided to resist and help Jiang Lang. Mr. Go was very unhappy about this and became very angry with those who were disobedient. Without wasting any time, he pulled out his whip from his bosom, intending to teach the boy and girl a lesson. At that moment, Lord Guo's subordinates rushed to attack in order to capture the people who refused to obey. Unfortunately, the boy and girl could not resist the bald men, and it seemed that now they would definitely be in trouble. Mr. Go watched what was happening with great pleasure, but he did not notice at all that right now someone was also closely watching him. The next moment, there was a loud explosion, which attracted the attention of everyone around and alarmed the guy's subordinates. The cause of this commotion was Chow Mu, who grabbed the scoundrel tightly by the neck and lifted him high above the ground. It seemed that the guy intended to teach Mr. Guo a lesson for his actions. The villain could not resist this at all, but he demanded that the main character let him go because he was the ruler of the city of Yangcheng. Chow Mu was not at all intimidated by his opponent's high status, so he continued to hold the boy tightly by the neck, intending to listen to what else he had to say. The villain was already choking and foaming at the mouth, but continued to threaten that his father would soon be here, and then the main character would lose his head. Surprisingly, Chow Mu was truly happy to hear all this, but he didn't show it at all and remained just as serious on the outside. Then the guy thought about the fact that initially he just wanted to kill the son of the city's ruler and die at the hands of his subordinates. But now, it was better for him if the city's ruler personally killed him. Suddenly, Chow Mu received a system notification telling him to act boldly and was about to evaluate his upcoming death. The guy received a C+ grade, which surprised him greatly because it meant that the system agreed with his thoughts. Moreover, this was the first time. Now the main character had his hands completely untied, which is why he could not hide his sincere smile. Meanwhile, Mr. Guo's subordinates had already fled to Chow Mu, intending to teach the boy a lesson and free the city ruler's son. Suddenly, the main character began to hit the villain hard on the cheeks with his palms, not worrying at all about the consequences. The bald men were shocked to see this, and the girl who did not obey Mr. Go's orders did not understand what was happening here at all. Chow Mu, with a smile on his face, loudly demanded that no one come near him, or else he would kill his captive. Lord Guo tried to threaten, but in the end he only begged not to be killed. It seemed that the main character did not like at all that the villain gave up so quickly and began to beg him for mercy. The guy began to hit Mr. Go even harder on the cheeks and demand that he quickly call his father here. Meanwhile, somewhere in the distance, the loud clatter of hooves could already be heard, which indicated the approach of the one whom Chow Mu so desired to see. Soon, several horsemen arrived at the scene. The protagonist was a little surprised by their quick appearance. It was the father of the scoundrel, and also the ruler of this city. Chow Mu, seeing Guo Yan, immediately considered that he looked very strong. Suddenly, the man loudly ordered his son, who was about to pour himself on the main character, to shut up. Chow Mu was taken aback by this, because Guo Yan was so good at martial arts that even just one of his words could cause such a strong tension. At the same time, the man, looking intently at the guy, was surprised that he had not yet fully developed his strength, but could already hold a person with one hand. After this, Guo Yan dismounted from his horse and immediately revealed a powerful aura that indicated his immense strength and incredible skills. His son's subordinates immediately bowed respectfully to him, because they had no doubts about the authority of the city's ruler. Meanwhile, Chow Mu stared at the man, fearing what might happen soon. The guy couldn't ignore Guo Yan's aura, which was putting a lot of pressure on him, and because of which it was very difficult to control himself and not tremble. However, the protagonist turned to the man and ordered him not to move, hinting that otherwise his son would be hurt. Guo Yan ignored this order and continued to walk forward, but he calmed his aura to show that he was ready to talk. At the same time, the man thought that the guy could use his strength, but he would not be able to do anything against his oppressive aura. Suddenly, Guo Yan began to smile kindly and asked Chow Mu not to be so impulsive. He also asked to let his son go and discuss everything calmly. The main character was very surprised by this because he hoped that the man would simply kill him and that all this would not take much time. Then the guy noticed that the system's assessment of his actions had not changed. He should continue to follow his intended plan. The protagonist began to try to provoke the man, but he remained as friendly and asked for forgiveness for his behavior from the guy and girl, who were members of the Manhwa clan. They didn't believe that Guo Yan had actually apologized to them, but they quickly decided that in any case, they couldn't do anything to him since he was the ruler of this city. Still, the boy and girl bowed respectfully and accepted the man's apology, while saying that they had no idea that such a situation could arise between them. Meanwhile, the people who were watching what was happening did not believe in Guo Yan's sincerity at all and thought that he would definitely not forget what happened today. Suddenly, Chow Mu, who was still intent on getting what he came here for, rudely addressed the city ruler in order to attract his attention. Then the guy asked if the man really thought that if he coughed up a tidy sum, everyone would forget everything. He also suggested that Guo Yan often cleaned up after his spoiled son. Chow Mu continued to tell that the son of the city ruler ordered his guards to beat up the people who blocked the way. The guy thought that these injured people simply would not have enough money. The protagonist fearlessly looked into Guo Yan's eyes and, without letting go of his son's neck, asserted that, in his opinion, there was simply not enough money here. Without expressing unnecessary emotions, the ruler of the city looked at the guy and thought only about how much he irritated him. However, he stated that he simply wanted his son to be okay and for no one else to get hurt. Chow Mu was already very tired of trying to provoke the man and so decided to act differently. The next moment, the protagonist directly stated that it would be best for Guo Yan to kill him right now. After Chow Mu said this, the square became completely silent. Only the sound of a slight wind could be heard. The people who suffered because of the son of the city ruler were surprised by what was happening and did not believe that a simple passerby decided to stand up for them. Meanwhile, Guo Yan sighed heavily, thinking that he and the main character still wouldn't be able to come to an agreement. The next moment, Chow Mu felt someone's presence behind him and was very surprised at how quickly and quietly this person was able to sneak up on him. The protagonist turned around sharply to look at his opponent, but saw only two fabric ribbons quickly heading towards him. A moment later, the spoiled son of the city's ruler was already lying on the ground and trying to breathe in as much air as possible. Now nothing threatened him. At the same time, Chow Mu was completely immobilized and defeated by an unknown old man who tied his hands and forced him to his knees. Despite this whole situation, the guy was very happy because he believed that all these actions would inevitably lead to the fulfillment of his plan, which was so highly appreciated by the system. Suddenly, Guo Yan turned to the main character and calmly asked his name. The guy quickly gave his name and said that he never had any patron, so the ruler of the city could just kill him right now. Guo Yan still remained calm and cool. He highly appreciated the protagonist's courage. Suddenly, the man ordered his subordinate to let the guy go, which caused confusion in both Chow Mu and the old man. Guo Yan then said that the main character was a very brave man, and that's why he liked him. He also said that if the guy was interested in joining the army, he could come to his mansion at any time. Despite the fact that the main character managed to save his life and even receive praise from a high-ranking person, he was not at all happy about it, because everything did not go according to his scenario. After this, Guo Yan was about to leave because his work here was finished. The son tried to turn to his father and object to his decision. Suddenly, the young man received a strong blow to the face, which quickly covered his mouth. Guo Yan was very unhappy with his son's behavior and said that he was too arrogant and therefore should not be seen by him again. At this point, all the work here was definitely done, so the ruler of the city, without a doubt, climbed onto his horse in order to leave here as quickly as possible. Finally, the man turned to the main character again and reminded him that he could come to his mansion at any time. Chow Mu was still shocked by the outcome of the current situation. The main character sincerely did not understand how everything could have gone in such a direction, and therefore now stood in the middle of the square with a stone face. Along with this, he heard the townspeople say that despite the worthless son, the ruler of the city was a good man, and therefore the guy was lucky, especially since he could potentially become a real defender. Meanwhile, Chow Mun was struck by lightning, as if he genuinely didn't understand why everything had returned to its previous course and why he was still alive. Despite the protagonist's indignation, the system's assessment of his actions remained just as high. The guy couldn't help but notice this and was very surprised that his mortality rate remained the same, so he assumed that the city's ruler was not involved in this assessment. Now he was interested in whether the rating would remain as high if he died right now, and whether the event had changed because of which his death would not be as planned. Chao Mu was distracted from these thoughts by unexpected applause that could be heard nearby. Looking around, the guy saw that the people around him were very grateful for his help and sincerely wished him all the best. This impressed Chao Mu. He realized that if he died now, he would become a young righteous man who cursed the ruler of Yancheng on the street and not like anyone else. The guy believed that this was exactly the way to activate the immortality system, and as long as he remains righteous and brave, his reputation and popularity will continue to grow. If he manages to die now, he will be able to become stronger, but if he doesn't die, he will be able to continue to accumulate rating during his life. In any case, he remained a winner. At the same time, when the main character does manage to die, his death will be the most cruel and powerful, which could not but please him. While Chao Mu was lost in his thoughts, the people around him looked at him in surprise, not understanding what was wrong with this strange guy. Meanwhile, the son of the city's ruler, who had been injured by the main character, was receiving medical assistance. Any touch to his cheeks was very painful for him. Now the guy was sincerely interested in why his father didn't teach Chao Mu a lesson, who dared to attack him. Guo Yan calmly replied that now they had nowhere to rush and nothing to worry about. The man recalled that when the guy was arrested, it was clear from the surroundings how much resentment the residents had accumulated regarding the current government. So if he had killed him in front of the people, his image would have been instantly destroyed. That was why the city's rulers now believed that it was better for him to recruit Chao Mu into the army in order to calm the ardor and gain the support of the people. After this, the man sternly told his disobedient son that he should have been punished long ago, otherwise he would soon become the cause of a catastrophe. So from that day on, the boy was not allowed to leave the house for a month. Guo Yan continued to say that during this time, the current saint could visit the Yancheng area, so the guy was punished during this period so that he would no longer be tempted to do mischief. The guy was very surprised and could not believe that Emperor Dian would come to their city, so he immediately asked if this news was true. Guo Yan calmly replied that no one would dare lie to someone like him about such news. He also added that during this period the city would be full of murderers. The guy immediately assumed that his father wanted to invite Chao Mu as a guard. The man confirmed this, but said that even if the guy did not agree, they could deal with him in another way. However, Guo Yan admitted that if the protagonist did accept his offer, everything would be much easier. Smiling slyly, the man remembered that there were battles going on the eastern mountain now, and therefore it would be possible to send the guy there as a soldier. Chao Mu arrived home and told his sister Shui what had happened. She was very surprised that the guy had beaten the son of the city ruler, but instead of punishment, he received an invitation to join the army. The girl thought that all this was promising. The main character said that he would still accept this offer and go to Guo Yan's mansion. Sister Zhe exhaled heavily because she thought that the guy's idea of joining the association was not entirely sound. The whole girl thought that since the main character insisted on his own, she should share with him one technique that could help him. She handed the guy a collection of secret martial arts techniques of the Chao family. The girl warned that because of them, Chao Mu's muscles could be seriously damaged, but the result was visible very quickly. This small book was a description of the skill Great Law of Heavenly Demon Disintegration. The main character was very happy to receive it and believed that it was another of his charms, which was supposed to help him achieve immortality. Sister Shui continued to say that first the guy needed to train his spiritual strength and then begin physical training. She thought that Chao Mu was a very capable guy, and his way of thinking was special, so it would be easier for him to master this or that technique, unlike others. Suddenly the girl fell silent because she heard how diligently the main character turned page after page, trying to read everything that was in the book as quickly as possible. Sister Shui was a little dissatisfied because she gave him this book not so that he could continue to work like this, but so that he would have a better chance of survival. Chao Mu began to assure his friend that he understood everything and would not overdo it. However, the main character continued to rejoice at this gift, which Sister Shui could clearly sense. She understood that Chao Mu would not listen to her. After some time, the guy had already arrived at the barracks of the garrison of the city of Yancheng, which was a military camp with many tents. Chao Mu immediately began training with the spear and learning the techniques of wielding this weapon. The guy held the spear quite confidently, which couldn't help but attract the attention of the other soldiers. The main character was very pleased with this weapon because he believed that since ancient times spearmen were considered lucky ones who were the first to be sent into battle. The soldiers watching the boy's training were surprised at the immediate powers he possessed and believed that only a holder of the 9th rank of strength could compete with him. In addition, the soldiers joked and suggested simply waiting until the main character himself died in battle in a few days, since he was able to avoid the wrath of the city's ruler. Qiao Mu didn't pay attention to these conversations and began to train his spiritual power while studying his skills in the He system. He was looking forward to the moment of his death. The main character was suddenly interrupted from this process by an unfamiliar voice that addressed her. The man asked with a smile on his face if the boy really wanted to acquire new skills. Qiao Mu happily confirmed this and asked old man Huang what he could offer him. The other soldiers laughed at the guy calling him Huan because it meant yellow, just like the man's teeth. The man continued to tell the protagonist that he had many interesting skills, but that he would have to work to master them. Qiao Mu agreed with great enthusiasm. Suddenly, another soldier intervened in this conversation, who advised the main character to first inquire about these skills and only then agree. The man who offered the job immediately replied that it was related to iron. Qiao Mu immediately imagined what the end result of mastering these skills might look like, and seemed to become even more enthusiastic. Still, the guy answered that more than anything in his life he loved studying martial arts, and therefore really wanted to master this mastery of iron. The man, hearing this, began to take out some book while saying that money was not needed here, and that the most important thing was hard work. After that, he looked around suspiciously to make sure that no one was eavesdropping on their conversation. Then he quietly began to tell that in fact, 4 months ago, Mr. Go hit his pregnant wife, from which the child died, and the woman became very weak after that incident. That's why now the man was kneeling and asking the main character to help him take revenge. Qiao Mu agreed, because he still needed to somehow thank him for the new techniques. The man, with tears in his eyes, thanked the protagonist for his help. Suddenly, one of the soldiers approached Qiao Mu and said that he needed to go somewhere. Qiao Mu, upon hearing this, immediately realized that something was wrong, but he decided to obey and follow the soldier. After some time, the guy entered a large tent which stood out from the rest of the garrison. The commander told the main character that in the eastern part of the city there lived the head of a bandit gang, whose name was Song Hei. Suddenly, the man broke off a small flag that clearly showed the location of the bandits on the model. The next moment, the commander continued to very emotionally talk about how this bandit proclaimed himself king, which was not funny at all. Qiao Mu remained as serious and calm as ever and continued to listen attentively to the man. The commander continued to tell that at first this bandit was engaged in stealing government property, but then he occupied the eastern lands and began to rage there. Moreover, this thief also took women captive, which greatly outraged the commander. The man hoped that if the captives were lucky, they would still be able to escape from the clutches of the villain. However, he was afraid that if they did not succeed, all the women would die, being at the very bottom of society. These words deeply hurt Qiao Mu, causing him to call the bandits beasts and become obsessed with the idea of exterminating them all. The commander really liked the guy's enthusiasm, so he continued to tell him that he was going to gather an army of 1,000 people and leave the city in 5 days. The man had already heard about how brave the main character was, so he offered him to be a pioneer. Without a moment's hesitation, Qiao Mu folded his hands together and loudly confirmed his intention to participate in this expedition as one of the pioneers. When all the issues were settled, the main character calmly left the tent and went about his business. Along with this, he thought about the fact that in the army of 1,000 people, there were only a few who had the same strength as him, but he was chosen as the pioneer. Qiao Mu was sure that it was not only because he was brave. Now the boy understood what the city ruler had planned. The main character also thought that his time had finally come to die, which could not but please him. While the guy was rejoicing at the upcoming prospect, barely hiding his emotions from others, the commander was watching him closely. The man didn't understand what was wrong with the main character and why he immediately agreed to become a pioneer. That's why the commander decided that he should have been more careful about this guy. 5 days later, as planned, an army of 1,000 men arrived at the mountains in the east to destroy the looming threat. Suddenly, the same man with yellow teeth approached Qiao Mu and offered to show the guy the way, since he knew this area very well. The main character agreed to accept the man's help, but asked him to walk behind him so that nothing bad would happen. The soldier was happy about this and said that the guy was the best person he had ever met, so he promised not to let him down. Qiao Mu insisted that his words were an order that the man had to strictly follow. The soldier was not at all against this. After some time, the partners were already making their way through the thickets of thick grass, waving a sharp sword along the way in order to clear a path for themselves. The man said that his daughter was very strong, and despite the fact that she was only 15 years old, she could already lift weights. The soldier asked what the boy was like at that age. Chow Mu thought for a while, but still answered that when he was 15 years old, he had already dealt with bad people. The man found it hard to believe. Suddenly, this conversation was interrupted. The main character felt the approach of danger. The next moment, the guy saw a black cloud of enemy arrows flying straight at him, but he remained absolutely calm. In order to protect his partner from the threat, the main character, without wasting time, pushed him forward with his foot so that the arrows would not hit him. At the same time, Chow Mu walked towards the danger with great enthusiasm and fearlessness, as if he intended to stop all those arrows. The guy began to quickly spin his spear in his hands to deflect all the arrows flying at him. Unfortunately, several arrows had already hit the main character, which is why he realized that the movie that depicted such situations was a complete fraud. Soon after, several armed bandits whose faces were hidden under masks jumped out of the bushes. This greatly frightened the man with its unexpectedness. The bandits immediately rushed towards the main character and his partner, as if they knew exactly who their target was today. Chow Mu was happy and thought that his death was not far off. He also noticed that the system data was being updated, so he assumed that the tougher the battle, the better the mortality rate. The main character was full of enthusiasm, so he ordered his partners to take up arms and go with him to battle. The soldiers obeyed the orders of their commander and fearlessly entered into battle with the bandits. Of course, this battle was not an easy one because the bandits were very good with their weapons, so not all the soldiers could leave the battlefield unharmed. Luckily for one of the men, his opponent was suddenly pierced by a sharp spear that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Without wasting any time, the spear owner quickly freed his weapon and headed towards the next bandit to teach them a lesson for their many crimes. This skilled warrior was Chow Mu, who quickly moved from one target to another in order to meet a worthy opponent among all these scoundrels and die at his hand. The soldiers who watched the main character from the side were surprised at how careless he was, but they recognized his skill. The bandits also watched Chow Mu, and seeing how dangerous an opponent he was, they decided not to take risks and quickly ran to a safe place. The guy was very surprised that the battle ended so quickly. After this, the main character calmly began to pull arrows out of his wounds with his bare hands while saying that he should stop the bleeding. Suddenly, the guy's partner fell to his knees and began to thank him for saving him because he took the blow and protected him. Soon it was time for Chow Mu to rest while receiving medical treatment, complaining that one city was worse than the other. Initially, the guy just wanted to kill his opponents and had no idea that they would escape. Suddenly, the man with the beard turned to the commander and said that since he had saved his partner's life, he had certainly repaid him in full for the techniques that he had shared. Chow Mu didn't want to talk about it and once again dry up gratitude, so he asked the man with the beard if he had anything interesting for him. The man replied that he hadn't taken anything with him, but when they returned to the city, he would be able to offer something to the main character for saving Old Man Huan. Then Chow Mu surveyed the surrounding area from a high hill and assumed that either a bandit hut was located at the mouth of the valley or an ambush was waiting for them, so the risk of death was increased. Then the boy asked the Old Man Huan what the name of this valley was. According to the man, it had no name. Then the main character decided that since it didn't have any name, it should be called the Lomu Valley. He carved this name on one of the trees. At the same time, the guy was thinking that this was a good name for the place where he would die. Of course, he didn't tell any of his subordinates about this. Suddenly, a rider approached Chow Mu and asked why he and his group were standing still instead of moving forward. The main character told the commander about what happened. Then the man insisted that if the guy was in trouble again, he would immediately come to the rescue, so there was no need to fear a battle. The man also grabbed his sword and asked if Chow Mu was going to disobey the order, thinking at the same time that if he disobeyed, he would immediately kill the guy. Much to the commander's surprise, the main character had no intention of stopping and intended to carry out his order. At the same time, Chow Mu thought that he shouldn't have given the list to the commander so as not to die for disobedience. It was better for him to die at the hands of bandits. The main character also thought that when he completely figured things out, he would be able to pay back the commander for everything. Suddenly, the guy felt a familiar feeling that indicated the approach of danger. Because of this, he concentrated Mikom and forgot about everything unnecessary. As it turned out, Chow Mu's senses were not deceived. Armed bandits were quickly approaching the group of soldiers, intending to make up for their shameful flight. Old Man Juan was frightened that they had nevertheless fallen into an ambush and believed that there were too few of them to resist the enemy. The protagonist ordered his subordinates not to stand still but to run. The soldiers obeyed the guy's order and quickly ran to a safe place along the way, admiring the fact that their commander risked his life for them. Meanwhile, Chow Mu fearlessly accepted the fight against several opponents at once in order to fulfill the purpose for which he came to this valley. Along the way, he loudly shouted after his subordinates so that they would quickly leave and not even think about returning, because this was his order. It was very difficult for Old Man Juan and the other soldiers to deliberately leave such a good man to certain death, but they could not help but obey. Suddenly, a horseman addressed the soldiers from a high cliff and loudly ordered them not to retreat but to go into battle. It was the commander who insisted that this was his order, which the soldiers had to carry out despite the words of the protagonist. Chow Mu heard this clearly and immediately felt that he would not be able to die peacefully if the entire army began to fight the bandits. At the same time, Old Man Juan was very glad that they were given a different order, and along with the rest of the soldiers, he intended to die on the battlefield along with the main character. Suddenly, the man felt a strong pain in his side after someone hit him with a spear. It was Chow Mu who insisted that his subordinates leave so that they would not die here and hurt their families. Old Man Juan did not agree with this order and said very emotionally that they could not just watch the main character die here instead of them. Hearing this, Chow Mu loudly replied that his subordinates did not need to look at this, after which the guy quickly ran towards the enemies, who were already shooting at him with a bow. The soldiers did not know what to do, but they certainly could not accept the fact that their commander was going to certain death. At the same time, Chow Mu was very happy about what was happening, because it was precisely this kind of battle that he had been striving to participate in recently. However, he did not allow his opponents to kill him without a fight. Suddenly, an enemy arrow hit the main character right in the chest, which significantly dampened his ardor. It was a fairly serious injury. The bandits took advantage of this moment and rushed towards Chow Mu in order to destroy their strongest opponent. The guy understood perfectly well that this was the end for him and he would finally be able to die, but nevertheless, he perceived what was happening with a smile on his face. Despite the fact that the main character was seriously wounded, he still continued to fight back. The bandits could not finish what they started. Chow Mu dealt mercilessly with his enemies, so that other bandits would think twice before engaging in combat with him. The guy remained standing on his feet, holding the spear tightly in his hands. He loudly ordered his subordinates not to move and not to engage in battle. At the same time, the main character, addressing his enemies, asked them to attack because he was completely ready to continue the battle. Chow Mu felt an incredible surge of strength, so he decided to continue the battle in order to destroy as many villains as possible before his death. The guy perceived everything that was happening with a smile on his face, despite the serious wounds that were becoming more and more numerous on his body. Despite futile attempts to overcome the guy, the bandits continued to advance, not realizing that they were heading to certain death. Chow Mu, using all his skill, was able to single-handedly confront his enemies while thinking that he was about to make a breakthrough. He really liked this feeling, because then his death would be even more memorable for others. Meanwhile, from a safe place, the commander watched what was happening in the valley and was surprised that the main character had awakened an inner strength. The man believed that a martial artist who was able to train his fighting spirit at the age of 20 was either very talented or brave, but he wondered how much longer Chow Mu could hold out. Unexpectedly, the commander noticed how skillfully the main character wielded the spear and with what force he swung this weapon. The man was shocked by what he saw and did not understand where the guy got such abilities from, because they certainly did not teach such techniques in the army. Continuing to closely watch the battle, he assumed that the main character definitely had some kind of hidden skill, otherwise he would have died long ago. After thinking for a bit, the man realized that the guy had used the technique of the heavenly demon. He was amused by this, but he thought that it was a very rude move. Now the commander was absolutely sure that Chow Mu would soon meet his end despite all his desperate attempts to survive. Meanwhile, Old Man Juan, with tears in his eyes, loudly called out to the protagonist, intending to rush to help right now, having drained his order. The man and his comrade rushed towards Chow Mu, but suddenly the boy struck the ground with all his might with the handle of his spear. At that very moment, a powerful wave formed around him, which threw his opponents back. The main character himself again ordered his subordinates not to come closer. The soldiers were amazed by the boy's skill, and they could only watch indifferently from the sidelines while he continued to fight until the very end. Chao Mu confidently declared that he would not allow anyone to cross the line because this fight was only his. At the same time, the bandits did not seem to be afraid of the guy's persistence. They felt his end was approaching, so they gathered their strength again and prepared to attack him. The enemies all rushed together to meet the main character, who was clearly already exhausted and could barely stand on his feet. Despite this, Chao Mu smiled widely because that was all he needed right now. He did not just stand and wait for his death and decided to rush to meet his opponents, getting rid of them one by one along the way. The guy continued to fight until the very end. He managed to kill his opponents quite effectively, but he could not defend himself from absolutely all attacks, so he received serious injuries. Old Man Huang and the rest of the soldiers remained on the sidelines as they were ordered, but continued to blame themselves for not fighting alongside Chao Mu. Unexpectedly, one of the enemy arrows still managed to slip through the main character's impregnable defense. This arrow hit the guy straight in the heart and pierced his body. Only after that did the battle stop. There was absolute silence all around, broken only by the quiet crying of Old Man Huan. He did not hold back his emotions, because he was well aware of how great the loss was. The other subordinates of the protagonist also could not hold back their tears as they looked at the motionless Chao Mu, who stood unshakably on the mountain of bodies of his defeated opponents. Despite the fact that for everyone the guy's death was a great loss, he himself was very pleased that everything happened exactly this way, as evidenced by the wide smile that froze on his face. The rider on horseback and his subordinates continued to observe everything that was happening from a safe place. The man was pleased that everything was finally over and therefore did not even try to hold back his sly smile. Finally, he drew his sword and loudly ordered all his subordinates to attack and avenge the death of the pioneer Chao Mu. After some time, everything was over. The captain rode on horseback past the lifeless bodies of the defeated enemies, assessing the results of the battle that had taken place. Of course, the man was heading towards Chao Mu, who remained standing unmoving in his place. It seemed that the commander wanted to make sure that the guy was really dead. Having made sure that the result had been achieved, the man ordered all his subordinates to return to the city, since their work here was finished. Old Man Huan was very surprised to hear this order because they still had not found the bandits' lair, which meant their final goal had not been achieved. The commander calmly explained that there were too many bandits and they would not be able to cope with them, so they had to return. Old Man Huang was very unhappy with this and believed that in this case Chao Mu had died in vain. His comrade encouraged the man and suggested that instead of objecting, he helped the protagonist's blind sister. Then the concerned soldiers began to remove Chao Mu's body from the mountain of corpses. They didn't even realize that right now, their commander was closely watching them. Chao Mu was able to successfully revive and was now safe and sound. His plan had worked perfectly. Looking at his characteristics, the guy saw that all his skills were studied to the maximum, and the mortality rating increased to rank B. In addition, he received a lot of points. The main character immediately remembered all his training and also added new information to his existing knowledge. Chao Mu was very happy with the result of his death because he understood that just to reach rank B and learn the skills 100%, he needed at least 20 years of hard work. However, the guy had no intention of stopping there, and now he was very interested in what needed to be done to reach rank A. Suddenly, Chao Mu's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar feeling that he had been experiencing quite often lately. It seemed to him that some danger was approaching him, so he immediately prepared his weapon in order to fight back anyone who dared to attack him. It turned out that the main character's skills were so good that he could even sense the presence of a small bug near him. Realizing how much stronger he had become, the guy felt that the high quality of death had definitely benefited him. Chao Mu felt that he had his commander to thank for this. At that very moment, the man felt a cold that made his body tremble involuntarily. Meanwhile, all the soldiers, having obeyed the commander's order, returned home, not forgetting to take Chao Mu's body from the battlefield. The unexpected man noticed a tree on which some hieroglyphs were carved. He immediately asked what was written there. The soldiers said that not long before his death, Chao Mu named this valley Lomu and wrote it on this tree. One of the soldiers emotionally continued to tell that the guy knew that an ambush would await them here, and therefore decided to give a name to this valley at the end, realizing that he would die. Old Man Huan, along with the rest of his comrades, also began to cry, unable to contain their emotions because they understood that the main character had died for them. At the same time, the commander remained just as cold-blooded and ordered his subordinates not to mourn the dead, but to return home as quickly as possible. The commander dismounted from his horse and walked towards the soldiers to understand what could have delayed them. Old man Huang bowed respectfully to the man and pointed to the cloth bundle and said that it was Chao Mu's corpse. The man didn't seem at all happy that his subordinates took the main character's body with them. Old man Huan noticed this reaction and became very angry, already anticipating that the commander would forbid him to take the body with him. To my surprise, the commander said that the guy's body should not have been left to be torn apart by local animals. He then asked his subordinate to send the main character's body to Yancheng City and promised that he would personally help with the funeral. Old man Huang complied, but continued to blame the commander for what happened. After that, the man went back to his horse, thinking along the way that Chao Mu was a good warrior who killed many bandits. He hoped that, in the future, there would be more such people in the army. The commander also thought that his task could be considered completed, which could not but please him. Now all that was left for him to do was deliver the body to the ruler of the city. Suddenly the man remembered that according to Chao Mu himself, he had a blind sister who needed care. The commander licked his lips disgustingly and decided that he should take care of this girl. At that moment, the man suddenly began to cough up blood and his face twisted from the terrible pain that pierced his neck. It turned out that an unknown person, being on a high mountain, was able to hit the man with a spear right in the neck, thereby mortally wounding him. The attack was so powerful that it pinned the villain's body to a nearby tree. With the last of his strength, which was quickly leaving him, the man tried to see the one who attempted to take his life. The man saw an inconspicuous dark figure who was watching him die from afar. Taking a closer look, the man realized that his killer was a man similar to Chao Mu. This commander was overcome with indescribable horror. This was the last thing he saw in his life. The next moment, Captain Chu died. Meanwhile, his subordinates looked around trying to figure out what had happened and who had attacked the man. However, one of the soldiers loudly declared that they were being attacked by enemies, so everyone had to prepare for battle. At the same time, Old Man Huan asked his friend if he had seen that inconspicuous silhouette on the top of the mountain. The man did not answer, but it was clear that he had seen it too. After that, he unfolded the package to make sure that it was Chao Mu's body that they had taken from the battlefield. As it turned out, there was no mistake. The soldiers were horrified and immediately realized that something was wrong here, so they decided to pretend to each other that they saw a bandit and they saw someone else. After that, they loudly announced to all their comrades that the bandits were returning, so they all had to gather. Soon all the soldiers, in order to survive, quickly left the valley without even taking the body of their commander with them. Meanwhile, Chao Mu, away from all the commotion, was assessing his skills. He was killed by the fact that Captain Chu, being a representative of the 8th rank, could not withstand his attack. Thanks to this, the protagonist realized that his mortality assessment instantly threw him back to the 8th rank of strength, which could not but please him. Now he could easily confront strong opponents. In addition, this time the guy managed to take control of his techniques, but unfortunately, he had to sacrifice his right hand for this. The main character believed that he was born for this self-destruction technique. In addition, the guy really hoped that the soldiers would soon find out who exactly killed their captain and avenge him. The protagonist's enthusiasm quickly faded when he heard that the soldiers, afraid of the bandits, were retreating to a safe place. Chao Mu was very unhappy about this because he planned to die with their help in order to become even stronger. Suddenly the boy heard the voice of Old Man Huan, who loudly warned his comrades that the bandits were approaching, and therefore they had to run away. Chao Mu was angry that he saved this man's life, and now he was hindering him like this. Judging by the man's voice, the guy assumed that the soldiers thought that the bandits killed the captain and not him. However, the main character was not very upset about this because everything around was changing very quickly, and any failure could instantly turn into a great success. The guy immediately felt the presence of bandits behind him, who in his opinion appeared just in time. Then the main character loudly addressed these scoundrels and said that he would not allow them to ambush the soldiers, and therefore before they did this, they would have to fight him. Chao Mu really hoped that these bandits would kill him, but they remembered well that the guy had already been killed quite recently, which made them very scared. Suddenly the bandits began to quickly run away, not wanting to engage in battle with someone who should have already been dead. They were very frightened by the fact that after the recent battle in the valley, the guy was not even wounded. Chao Mu, in order to correct his situation, quickly caught up with the men and, smiling good-naturedly, asked them not to worry, because the man they killed had really died and he was his older brother. The bandits had no intention of believing the guy, whom they considered a real demon, despite the fact that he insisted on his own and assured that he had come to avenge his brother. However, this still did not make the bandits believe the main character, because he had recently killed Captain Chu, and now he probably wanted to deal with them too. The men were very afraid that they were being pursued by the ghost of the enemy he had killed, and begged him not to follow them. However, Chow Mu continued his pursuit with great enthusiasm. Soon the bandits ran out into a forest clearing where their comrades were patiently waiting. In addition to the usual bandits, there was also their leader, who gave off a very dark aura, which testified to his incredible strength. The men, seeing their boss, began to loudly ask him for help and tell him that they were being haunted by a real ghost. Chow Mu was glad to meet the bandit leader because he thought that when he was killed by a simple soldier, he received a B rank, and if he was killed by the leader, he would surely rise to A rank. In order to immediately demonstrate his intentions and provoke a battle, the main character loudly declared that he had come here to avenge his brother, who had been killed by bandits. At that moment, the bandit's head took only one step towards the guy, but its power was enough to cause a noticeable tremor of the earth. Chow Mu immediately stopped and looked at the bandit to understand who he was about to fight and at whose hands he would die. The main character was a little surprised to see this man in front of him, because he knew that it was Song He who was the leader of the bandits. The mysterious man seemed very pleased that Chow Mu recognized him. Unexpectedly for the protagonist, Song He put his hands forward to respectfully greet his guest. The young man smiled good-naturedly and confirmed that his name was Song He and that he was indeed the leader of the people surrounding him. Chow Mu didn't take Song He's appearance at all and remained just as focused and suspicious. At the same time, the leader of the bandits continued to show respect to his guest. It seemed that there was no danger to be expected from this man. Suddenly, Chow Mu began to cough up blood heavily. He was very surprised by this and did not believe that the bandits were actually led by a sick person. Then one of his subordinates approached the guy and told him that the main character, according to him, was Chow Mu's brother, and moreover killed his captain, Song. He was surprised to hear this information and began to stare at the guy, Chow Mu, which made him feel awkward, but he immediately prepared for battle. The bandits' leader, seeing this, began to smile and say that in his opinion, there was a lot that could be discussed with the guy. Song. He continued to say that not everyone could kill their captain, so Chow Mu acted very bravely. He also invited the guy to join him. The bandit leader really wanted Chow Mu to follow him everywhere and tell him about the latest events. The main character was very surprised that the guy wanted to recruit him, and therefore asked if Song He was afraid that he would start to take revenge for his murdered brother. To this, the leader calmly replied that his death made no sense to the main character. At that moment, the guy's peaceful face seemed to emit a bright light. This light almost blinded Chow Mu, so he agreed that the bandit leader was right. The next moment, the main character quickly cast aside extraneous thoughts because he wanted to clarify some information. The guy very emotionally asked why a seemingly noble man founded a gang and lived in the mountains hiding from the authorities. At the same time, Chow Mu thought that the bandits would definitely not be able to brainwash him, and he definitely just wanted to die quickly. Suddenly, the protagonist interrupted his thoughts because he noticed that Song He's subordinates were gradually surrounding him. The eyes of all these people were burning with rage because Chow Mu was looking down on them and their leader. They really wanted to teach the guy a lesson right now. The main character was very pleased that the bandits were angry with him and wished that they would come quickly and kill him. Unexpectedly, Song. He put his hand out to the side, showing his subordinates that they shouldn't have attacked the protagonist. None of the bandits objected to this decision. After that, the guy turned to Chow Mu and asked if he really didn't understand why he and his people ended up in such a situation. The main character assumed that all this was connected with difficult circumstances and the famine that reigned in the cities. The guy was familiar with this because initially he died precisely because of hunger. Song. He was surprised that his guest was so familiar with the troubles of ordinary people. He all confirmed that it was for this very reason that they were all here now. The bandit leader continued to say that it was very difficult to survive now, and their ideals were incomprehensible to ordinary people. Suddenly, the guy began to take his sword out of its sheath, while saying that he wanted to be the one who would help others in this difficult situation. After that, Song. He decided to ask the protagonist again if he wanted to join him. The sharp sword made it clear that Chow Mu's life depended on the correct answer. For a moment, the guy thought about this proposal, but as soon as he exhaled heavily, it became clear that his answer was obvious. The next moment, the main character firmly and clearly stated that he refused the offer to join the bandits. It was clear that it was useless to try to convince him otherwise. The guy also said that he didn't want to have anything to do with the bandits. Then Song He suggested that he see for himself how they lived, hoping that after that, he would change his mind. The main character easily agreed with this, thinking at the same time that if he ended up in the bandits' lair, he definitely wouldn't be able to leave there alive. Chow Mu was very happy that his path would soon lead him to his desired death. 4 hours later, the main character, accompanied by bandits, reached a large settlement that was hidden high in the mountains. Looking around, Chow Mu felt that this place looked more like a village than a bandit den. The guy was surprised that not only criminals lived in this settlement, but also children and elderly people. Song. He said that these were all poor and disadvantaged people who were once driven out of the city of Yancheng. The guy continued to tell that the ruler of the city cared only about the immortals and tried to please them in every possible way while not paying attention to the ordinary people. Chow Mu heard about the immortals and was very interested and asked to tell him more about it. Song. He was surprised that the guy was asking about it because it was obvious that he practiced the Fist of Immortality technique. To this, the main character quickly responded that he really had no connection with the immortals, and the technique he practiced could not tell him all the secrets of the world. Song. He laughed at this and then added that the Fist of Immortality technique was a special art that was not given to everyone. After this, the leader of the bandits said that this was not a suitable place for conversation and asked the protagonist to follow him. Soon our heroes came to a small Taoist temple because it was here that what Song He wanted to show his new acquaintance was located. The guy pointed to a small stone statue of a sage that was located near the altar and suddenly declared that it was an immortal. Chow Mu asked if his interlocutor was talking about the statue of Song He and explained that it was a statue of a Taoist mentor who was currently living in the world of immortals. Hearing this, the main character thought that he might have done everything in vain because the gap between the martial arts master and the immortality cultivator was very large. He already doubted that he would be able to achieve what he wanted at all. Song He continued to say that in fact humans and immortals had almost the same origins, but immortals lived in heaven and did not take mortals into account at all. They perceived mortals as their servants, forcing them to grow various spiritual roots and please them. Mortals, of course, did not consider themselves cattle, but they could not resist. Song. He thought the funniest thing was that mortals were enslaved without even knowing it and were a kind of resource in the hands of immortals. Chow Mu found it very unpleasant to listen to this. This whole arrangement reminded him of capitalism, which gave him a disgusting feeling. Then the main character thought about the fact that high profitability was accompanied by high risks, and at the same time, it was necessary to please the immortals. Suddenly, the guy became interested in whether the system would be able to resist the immortals. In order to check this, Chow Mu suddenly jumped up and quickly ran towards the stone statue. Then he jumped high up as if he was trying to climb the statue of Song He. Seeing all this, he was shocked and tried to explain that the guy shouldn't have done this. Without giving the bandit leader a chance to finish speaking, Chow Mu loudly declared that he was born to be free. Right now, the main character with burning eyes was swinging his fist because he wanted to break the statue and then wait for lightning to strike him. Chow Mu quickly flew towards the statue of the immortal, and with a satisfied smile on his face declared that he had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Song He was shocked and did not understand what the guy was trying to achieve. The main character had already swung his fist in order to hit the statue with all his might and destroy it. Seeing this, the leader of the bandits felt that he had to immediately intervene and stop his guest. Suddenly, Song He's sword appeared right in front of the protagonist, protecting the immortal statue from a powerful punch. As soon as the dangerous weapon flew away, He breathed a sigh of relief, believing that he had managed to avoid the destruction of the statue. Unfortunately for the guy, his sharp sword pierced the stone statue with great force, causing it to crack. A moment later, the immortal statue began to crumble, shocking Song He even more. Meanwhile, the main character looked at the leader of the bandits with displeasure, because here he almost prevented him from carrying out his plan. Chow Mu immediately began to ask suspiciously why the guy was trying to stop him. He explained that he was practicing magic and not cultivating immortality. In common parlance, this was called managing immortals. The guy continued to say that immortals were not supposed to live, and he could not wait for the moment when they would all be exterminated, but it was impossible to break the statues so as not to bring heavenly punishment. Chow Mu replied with displeasure that he had wanted to bring heavenly punishment upon himself in this way. But now, due to the intervention of the bandit leader, everything was in vain. He was very surprised and even admired that the main character was so brave that he was not afraid of the wrath of the immortals. The unexpected guy asked if martial arts were really useless in fighting the Celestials, since even Song He himself practiced immortality. The bandit leader will answer that martial arts trained the body, and the cultivation of immortality trained the soul. Even the strongest martial artists could not fight an immortal in spiritual power. Immortals were strong not only because of their techniques, but also because of their longevity. They could easily kill mortals. In addition, cultivating immortals was very difficult and progress in cultivation was slow. At the same time, the speed of martial arts practice was much faster than that of immortals. So Song He believed that if a person appeared in the world who could learn techniques and gain longevity, he would be able to fight with immortals. The guy also claimed that they were now very acutely concerned about the issue of overthrowing the immortals. This topic made him angry, which caused him to cough up blood. Chao Mu concluded that he had the Fists of Immortality, which was the exit from the realm of martial arts cultivation, and the resurrection system, so he could cultivate much faster than ordinary people. Unexpectedly, the main character confidently stated that in order to become immortal, tens of thousands of years were needed. Song He did not understand why this was said and considered his acquaintance strange. After that, the guy asked the bandit leader if he thought he had the qualifications to cultivate immortality. He was already thinking about finding a suitable cultivation method. Song. He didn't keep him waiting for long and directly stated that if the main character didn't have spiritual roots, then nothing would work out for him. Hearing this, the main character, for some reason, looked around suspiciously to make sure that no one was eavesdropping on this conversation. After that, he quietly asked the leader of the bandits whether his staff could be considered a spiritual root. The guy did not understand at all what his interlocutors meant. The next moment, the main character pulled his pants down a little and demonstrated what he was talking about. Song He was embarrassed and tried to politely say that he couldn't help his friend in any way. After that, the leader of the bandits said that if the guy had no more questions, then he should leave. Chao Mu was surprised by this because just recently, Song He wanted to recruit him. The guy replied that it was already clear to him that the main character was thinking about something great and pursuing good goals, but he couldn't help him in any way. Chao Mu reminded that if the leader let him go, it could pose a threat of Song He's lair being discovered. He believed that the guy was too annoying and therefore shouldn't stay here. Still, the leader, trying to remain as polite, replied that the main character did not seem like a bad person, and besides, they had been planning to leave these lands for a long time. Hearing this, Chao Mu resigned himself to the fact that he had to leave here, but at the end he promised that he would not tell anyone about the location of this settlement. Still, the main character left with dissatisfaction, thinking along the way that he would no longer run and would return to the city of Yancheng. Meanwhile, someone knocked on Sister Shui's house. The girl opened the door, hoping that it was Chao Mu who had returned. Unfortunately, Guoyan's son was waiting for her at the door, and he came to tell the girl the latest news. Without hiding his satisfaction, he stated that Chao Mu had shown himself to be very heroic, and that was why he had come here to express his gratitude to his sister. Seeing the girl, the scoundrel really regrets that such a beauty was left without sight. Meanwhile, Sister Shui asked what happened to the main character and why he hadn't returned yet. The city governor's son was very unhappy that he had to talk about Chao Mu. Nevertheless, he reported with great joy that the guy would not return home. Sister Shui, hearing this, could not simply believe it and demanded an explanation. The scoundrel folded his fan with a sharp movement in order to attract the girl's attention to what he was about to say. The next moment, placing his hand on the coffin, the guy loudly declared that Chao Mu had died. He didn't even try to hide his joy about this. The girl was shocked when she heard this, but until the very end she believed that it was a lie. Sister Shui claimed that the protagonist could not believe so easily, and was about to close the door so as not to listen to the stranger anymore. The son of the city ruler was not going to leave just like that, so he did not allow the girl to close the door. He wanted to enjoy this moment even more. The guy stated that he had already thought everything through and Chao Mu's corpse was here, so the girl could see for herself that all of this was true. Suddenly, the villain grabbed Sister Shui's hand tightly and tried to drag the girl outside. He continued to rejoice and say that he brought the main character's body here so that she could identify him. After that, the guy roughly grabbed the girl by the head and bent her over Chao Mu's lifeless body. The son of the city's ruler knew that she had not seen anything, so he decided to describe to her what the main character looked like now. He said that all the guy's bones were broken, and there were at least 50 living wounds on his body. The main character's face turned pale, and it was also covered in wounds. Sister Xue couldn't stand this bullying any longer, so she tried to break free from the scoundrel's grasp. The girl still could not believe the terrible words of the stranger who suddenly came to her house and wanted only for him to leave as soon as possible. At this, the son of the city's ruler began to grimace, as if he was parodying how the girl denied everything and called it a lie. He felt his complete impunity. So with a sly smile on his face, he asked whether the girl would feel better if all this really was not true. Sister Shua was very scared and couldn't say anything because she had already begun to believe that Chao Mu had really died. One of the soldiers watched all this from the side and was very angry about what the son of the city ruler had opened. He was about to kill this scoundrel, but old man Huan stopped him and asked him not to be so impulsive because they still couldn't even say a word against the guy. The soldiers decided to stay away, but as soon as the villain left, they wanted to help the girl bury Chao Mu and give her some money so that she would not grieve so much. Meanwhile, the city lord's son continued to mock Sister Shu and say that she should have cried if she wanted to and not held back. The guy decided to help the girl pour out her feelings, and for this he clapped his hands, letting his subordinate know that it was time to bring the dish prepared, especially for this occasion. The guy said that in the city of Yancheng, they believed that the main character was very courageous, so the girl should try a piece of his flesh and feel it. Hearing this, Sister Xue was struck by lightning from shock, because she could not believe that this scoundrel was even capable of such a thing. The son of the city's ruler, not hiding his great pleasure, ordered his subordinates to feed the girl a dish prepared especially for her. At that very moment, the girl was surrounded by scoundrels who seemed very happy to carry out their master's order. The cane that Sister Xue used to navigate her surroundings fell to the floor with a crash. She had no use for it now. Two of Mr. Guo's subordinates held the girl tightly, while the third scoundrel served her a dish prepared from the flesh of the deceased Chao Mu. The man roughly tried to open the girl's mouth so that she could try the soup that was prepared especially for her. Suddenly, the plate with the terrible dish disappeared from the man's hands. It turned out that some soldier quickly took it. These soldiers were accompanied by old man Huan, who ate the soup with pleasure and said that it was very tasty. The son of the city's ruler was very unhappy that the man dared to contradict him, and because of this, he kicked him hard. After this, the plate fell to the ground and the soup discharged, making it impossible for anyone else to eat it. The second soldier apologized for his colleague's behavior and said that old man Huan had acted very badly, but he was very hungry, so the gentleman should not be angry with him. The scoundrel was taken aback by what had happened because he looked at the soldiers with a lack of understanding, as if he didn't believe them at all. At the same time, old man Huan really began to play his role and gave the remains of food directly from the ground, which shocked the guy even more. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a stranger's voice came out who thought that this whole situation was very immoral. This voice attracted the attention of the city's ruler's son, so he turned to the side to see who it belonged to. It turned out that this acquaintance was Chao Mu. He praised the soup prepared from his flesh and asked to treat him too, while looking at the scoundrels with a crazy look. Old man Huan saw the main character and was very happy, and could not hold back his tears because he believed that his commander had somehow managed to survive. Sister Shui heard a familiar voice and was also glad that her friend was alive, although she didn't fully understand how this was possible. The old man who served as Mr. Guo's guard was shocked to see Chao Mu, as he did not believe that he could survive. The son of the city ruler also did not believe what was happening and was trembling with fear, because he already understood what this unexpected meeting promised him. The guy couldn't believe that Chao Mu was actually standing in front of him, so he quickly looked at the body that was lying in the coffin. There really was a corpse of a man lying there who looked very similar to the main character, but this did not provide any explanation. The villain did not understand how Chao Mu managed to survive. The protagonist saw this reaction, and it amused him greatly. Suddenly, the guy approached Mr. Go at great speed, which scared him greatly. The next moment, the main character swung his spear in order to kill this scoundrel right then and there. It seemed that he would be able to do this without any difficulty. Old man Huang and his colleague were shocked that Chao Mu still decided to take such a step without any fear of the consequences. At the same time, Mr. Guo's subordinates were very worried about him because if the main character really did kill the son of the city's ruler, then they certainly shouldn't expect mercy. Unfortunately, the old man whose duty it was to guard the city lord's son prevented Chao Mu from completing his plan. He quickly attacked the boy's hand and deflected his weapon to the side. The main character was very surprised that he missed, and his opponent remained alive. Moreover, the old man's attack was so fast that he couldn't even see it. The guy looked at the city ruler's son with a bloodthirsty gaze, which immediately made him feel a frantic fear. At the same time, he realized that he had just almost lost his life. Old man Huang, watching what was happening, suddenly assumed that this guy who suddenly appeared here was definitely not Chow Mun because he looked much more ferocious than him. The old man also believed that his opponent was not Chow Mu because his strikes were sharper and stronger, so he directly asked who this guy was. The main character, of course, could not tell the whole truth, so he answered that his name was Chow Lin. He then stated with tears in his eyes that Chow Mu was his younger brother, which could not help but surprise everyone present. The next moment, the guy flared up with rage again and continued to say that he saw his brother's mutilated body and therefore intended to avenge him without any fear of dying in the process. Hearing this, the old man who was guarding Mr. Go sighed heavily and decided to tell his opponent something. Suddenly he was interrupted by the son of the city's ruler, who quickly ran away and asked the old man to follow him, threatening the main character that he would kill him next time. The old man and Chow Lin were surprised by what was happening, but both felt that it was best for them to leave things as they were for now. The old man began to carry out his master's order and calmly leave. The protagonist did not even try to stop him, because he did not want to continue the battle yet. Looking after his opponent, the guy thought that Mr. Go would soon strike again, so he needed to die as quickly as possible and thereby improve his characteristics. Unexpectedly, the main character loudly announced to the elderly man that tomorrow he would bury the body of his beloved brother outside the city, thus making it clear where he could be found. Hearing this, the old man realized that his opponent was going to leave the city tomorrow, so he had to meet him. After that, Chow Lin began to say that he was very hungry and wanted to eat at least something. Along the way, he headed towards a large pot that stood on the ground. Seeing that there was soup in this pot, the main character decided to have it for lunch without any doubt. At this point, the alarmed soldiers began loudly asking the boy not to eat this dish because it was made from the flesh of his brother. Despite the warning, the boy continued to eat the soup with great appetite, which could not impress old man Huan. However, Chow Lin explained that there was pork liver and heart in the soup, and not what the men thought. In addition, the guy said that his brother's death was violent and his internal organs were badly damaged, so there was no way they could have been put into the soup. Watching the soldiers' reactions, Chow Mu could hardly contain his laughter and thought that he had not done all this in vain. The main character did not notice at all how at that time his sister Shui came up to him from behind and touched him, trying to understand who was standing in front of her. The guy was very scared out of surprise and even jumped away from the girl. Meanwhile, the city ruler's worried son loudly informed his father that Chow Mu's ghost would appear in Yancheng. Hearing this, Guo Yan calmly asked what his son and the old man did to this ghost. The old man said that his master's son expressed his condolences to the Chow family, but then the deceased's brother, whose name was Chow Lin, came. He looked exactly like Chow Mu. However, the older man noticed that these brothers differed from each other in height by 1 inch, and although they looked the same, they were clearly different ages. Next, Guo Yan asked what this guy's strength was. The old man replied that Chow Lin had an 8th rank of strength, but would soon reach the 9th, which was not surprising at all. The man believed that Chow Lin's appearance immediately after Chow Mu's death was not just a coincidence, but he did not have time to think about it because the emperor was approaching. That is why he ordered the old man to go and cut down everything down to the last root. Old man Afu understood perfectly well what his master was talking about. Watching the soldiers' reactions, Chow Mu could hardly contain his laughter and thought that he had not done all this in vain. The main character didn't notice at all how at that moment his sister Shui approached him from behind. The girl touched him, trying to understand who was standing in front of her. Suddenly she began to sniff the main character, which greatly shocked him. The guy felt awkward and therefore began to say that despite his age, it was still too early for him to enter into a relationship. Then he tried to distance himself from Sister Shui. The girl did not react to this in any way and was completely immersed in her thoughts. At this moment, the main character was distracted by old man Huan, who hesitantly turned to him to say something. The man gave the boy a small bag of money. Chow Lin was very surprised because his brother had supposedly died only a day ago, and the government had already reacted so quickly. The main character was very doubtful about this, so he asked the soldiers if this payment was really from the government. The men looked unsure but confirmed it. The guy, seeing their faces, immediately realized that most of the money in this bag belonged to the soldiers who wanted to take care of their commander's sister. Still, Chow Lin gave the men the money, saying that he didn't need money from such a terrible government. This greatly surprised old man Huang and his colleague. The bald man insisted that everyone had received money without exception. He also said that he had previously promised to give Chao Mu his skill book in exchange for help in the dynasty struggle. Chao Lin took the book for himself without any hesitation and did not hide his joy at all from the fact that he had the opportunity to learn another skill. After this, Old Man Huan and his comrade left, because that was the end of their business here. The protagonist turned to Mrs. Yu Shui and said that his brother often talked about her. The guy also said that tomorrow he would fight with the son of the ruler of Yancheng, so he had to leave these lands quickly. Yu Shui was still very sad that Chao Mu had actually died, so she was not talkative. Suddenly the girl began to sniff Chao Lin again, as if she could clearly sense the familiar scent emanating from him. The main character didn't like it very much, so he quickly stopped Sister Shuo, asking her to stop playing. Then the guy confidently stated that he had been practicing a certain skill for many years, so if the girl continued to do this, it would be hard for him to restrain himself. Suddenly, Yu Shui asked the protagonist to stop pretending. It seemed that she understood perfectly well that it was Chao Mu and no one else standing in front of her. The girl claimed that the guy was deliberately using strange phrases because he wanted to shake her sanity, but the smell of his body, manner of speech, voice, and intonation indicated that he was Chao Mu. The protagonist could not stop being surprised that blind people were so sensitive and believed that Sister Shu was a real province, which only confirmed the girl's guess. Now Yu Shui was very interested in how the main character managed to survive and fool everyone. Chao Mu said that he was allegedly seriously injured during the battle, and therefore his comrades thought that he had died. But later he was lucky enough to meet the head of the bandit Song He, whom he also deceived. Then the guy remembered that the girl said that she was born with spiritual roots, and therefore they wanted to accept her as a student, but the Chao family was a clan of martial arts and therefore refused to cooperate with the cultivators. To this, Sister Zhue replied that she had different views, which is why she was unable to follow the path of martial arts. Now the girl was seriously considering the idea of becoming a cultivator and devoting time to training. Chao Mu supported Yu Shui in this, but reminded him that the night of extermination could come soon, and then they would all be in trouble. Suddenly, Sister Shui spoke to the protagonist in a serious voice, as if she wanted to tell him something very important. Without going into details, the girl briefly asked Chao Mu to give her his hand, which of course left him puzzled. Then Yu Shui began to say that outside the city, there were many of Mr. Guo's men, and he himself was a 6th-rank martial arts master. In addition, he had more than 1,000 soldiers under his command. However, the main character had already reached the 8th rank of strength and had no equal, so Sister Shui again asked the guy to give her his hand and follow her. In fact, after what she saw today, the girl really wanted to take revenge on the villains, but she did not have the strength for this, so it was better for her to ask someone worthy about it. She could no longer ask Chao Mu about this because he had already given his life for her once, and she could not repay him in any way. That was why Yu Shui decided to give the boy the book Ripples and Waves, which could help him learn many techniques and accumulate spiritual power. Sister Zhue continued to say very emotionally that this book was a collection of her clan's techniques, and she was completely ready to entrust this last secret to the protagonist. Chao Mu was amazed by the girl's sincerity and her kind heart, and he could not hold back his tears. However, the main character accepted this gift without hesitation, not listening to the girl at all, who claimed that this knowledge was a great responsibility. Hearing this, Chao Mu became silent for a while and began to think seriously about something. Soon he turned to the girl again and reminded her that he still had one matter in which he needed her help. Chao Mu directly asked if Sister Shui had already finished reading that very book. It seemed that the girl immediately understood what the main character was asking her about. The next day came. Before parting, the boy told Yu Shui that the two of them had a path they had to take to achieve what they wanted. The main character was sure that if they just stood still, then nothing would change. It turned out that Sister Zhue had a very hard time saying goodbye, so she didn't even know what to say. Still, she calmly replied that you would wait for the guy outside the city for a week, as they had agreed. She already wanted to say what she would do if the guy didn't come, but still decided not to disturb herself and her interlocutor with such thoughts. Instead, the girl said with a smile that when they meet again, she will continue their path together. Very soon, a satisfied Chao Mu went out of the city in order to supposedly bury his dead brother. The guy carried a small coffin with the ashes of his clone in his hands. He liked the fact that this box was so beautiful. Having reached the right place, the guy began to dig a small hole, talking along the way about how much he regretted the death of his brother, and then that he now did not know how he could continue to live. At this time, the main character was closely watched by his opponent, who nevertheless came here in order to finish what he started. It was old man Afu, who was now determined to carry out his master's order and was ready for absolutely anything. Without wasting any time, the elderly man rushed at the protagonist without warning, hoping to catch him off guard and end this fight as quickly as possible. Despite this suddenness, Chao Mu was prepared and managed to outwit the old man. It turned out that the old man broke the coffin with ashes. Small grains of ash immediately fell into the eyes of old man Afu, causing him severe pain and unable to see anything. The elderly man, coming to his senses, assumed that it was some kind of special technique that Xiao Lin's deceased brother definitely had. The main character continued to adhere to his image, so he confirmed that this technique belonged to his brother, but it was also useful to him in battle. The next moment, Chao Mu, sincerely wishing for the death of his opponent, pierced the old man with his spear, causing blood to spray all around. At the same time, the guy thought that such a brave opponent as old man Afu would definitely be recognized by his immortality system, so he should continue the fight. Despite being seriously injured, the old man was not going to give up and said that even without his sight, he would get rid of Xiao Lin. After that, he kicked the guy in the chest with all his might. This blow was so powerful that it literally shattered several of the main character's ribs into pieces, making his entire body feel as if it had been pierced by lightning. In addition, this attack allowed the old man to throw Xiao Lin away from himself in order to buy some time to recover. It seemed that Chao Mu could no longer avoid the end, since he had nothing more to hope for. Of course, this did not upset the main character at all. He was very pleased that he would now die at the hands of old man Afu and sincerely thanked him for this. Old man Afu watched silently as his mortally wounded opponent fell from the high cliff. At the same time, he thought about the fact that two brothers had rushed to desecrate the ruler of the city, for which they were awaiting punishment in the form of death. The elderly man thought that his work here was finished, so he began to leave because it was time for him to return to other duties. The old man did not immediately see that a mysterious man was standing right in front of him, which meant that the battle was not yet over. The next moment, the martial artist saw the man's face and could not hide his surprise. In front of him stood a guy who looked exactly like Chao Mu. He proudly declared that the Chao family members were not so weak that a battle with them would end so quickly. The old man immediately thought that fortunately he had already dealt with one of the brothers, because it would have been difficult for him to stand up to two such strong opponents at once. Suddenly, the main character, blazing with rage, ran towards the elderly man without removing the crazy smile from his face. Soon the guy pushed off the ground with force and jumped forward to attack his opponent. Old man Afu managed to dodge this lightning attack, but was surprised that this guy used the same technique as his previous opponent. In order to deal with his opponent, the elderly man first quickly wrapped the protagonist's leg with cloth to immobilize him. After this, the old man swung his hand to attack the guy, while they were saying that he would become another fan who would die from his hand. The master's powerful blow hit the target straight on, and it was enough for Chao Mu's third clone to die and follow in the footsteps of the previous one. After this, the elderly man breathed a sigh of relief, believing that this guy was definitely finished. At that very moment, the old man heard a familiar voice behind him and was stunned by the silk, because he could not believe that another representative of the Chao family was standing behind him. To make sure of this, the martial artist turned around sharply and to his great surprise saw another guy who looked like Chao Mu. The protagonist happily greeted the old man, pretending to be another member of the Chao family. The old man couldn't believe it and began to assume that his opponent was a real monster or a demon. He also believed that he had somehow fallen into an illusion. The master even began to doubt himself and whether he clearly saw what was happening before his eyes, believing that he could have fallen into some kind of trap. Suddenly, the elderly man's body was pierced by a sharp pain from a recently received wound. This pain quickly brought him to his senses. Meanwhile, the main character immediately decided to attack her opponent. The old man was ready to defend himself and confidently said that it was impossible to deceive him with a pathetic fake. Chao Mu attacked the master with all his might with his spear, but the master managed to easily stop the blow with his bare hands. Old man Afu looked at the maddened boy with horror and thought about where the Chao family members got such enormous strength from and why they were not afraid of death at all. However, the elderly man quickly pulled himself together and attacked the main character in response, thanks to which he was able to throw him away from you. Chao Mu tried to resist this, but his opponent was very strong and, in addition, the techniques that the guy used brought him painful wounds and injuries. Thanks to this, the elderly man was able to choose the right moment and attack his opponent again without even using any weapons. This was the end for another clone of the main character, but he did not despair and finally warned the old man that they would meet again soon. The elderly man, although he had won, was in no hurry to rejoice, because he was already certain that he had fought a real demon. Chow Mu, who once again suddenly appeared behind the old man, clarified that he was not a demon, but only had a demonic body. It seemed that such sudden appearances no longer surprised the martial arts master, who was ready to defeat another copy. The old man burst into tears and loudly declared that he would not fall into this trap again. The next moment, the two opponents quickly approached each other, wanting to mercilessly kill their opponent. The protagonist admitted that the old man was an excellent warrior and thought that last time he received good rewards for the death of a C rank, but unfortunately the last death was only a D rank. Then the guy, despite the fact that he had taken a strong blow from the elderly man, decided that he no longer needed him, so it was time to kill old man Afu. To do this, Chow Mu decided to use the broken piece of his spear, the tip of which was still intact and perfect for killing. The protagonist managed to deftly bypass the martial arts master's defense and plunge a sharp spear into his chest. The sharp pain that followed this seemed to sharpen the senses and give incredible strength to old man Afu. That's why he was able to quickly grab his opponent by the arm and swing it to throw him away from you. The old man did not limit himself and threw the guy off the cliff, thus definitely ending this battle and at least resting a little. The old man was breathing heavily and shouting loudly that no matter whether his opponent was a demon or a human, he would not give up so easily and would continue the fight. At this moment, Chow Mu's clone once again appeared behind the martial artist, and this time he didn't hesitate and immediately rushed towards him. The main character grabbed the old man tightly, with a grin on his face, saying that the old man could tell about all this in the next world. Also, Chow Mu no longer hid the fact that after what he was about to do, he would simply be reborn again. The next moment, the protagonist and the old man jumped off the high cliff. Now he wanted to take advantage of his last resurrection this week. Chow Mu held his opponent tightly so that he could not break free from his grip and try to escape. The martial artist desperately tried to push the guy's hands away from himself, but he was unable to do so. In response to any resistance, Chow Mu would apply even more of her efforts to subdue the old man and suppress his will to live. However, the old man managed to weaken one of his opponent's arms, injuring it badly, so the guy quickly grabbed the old man Afu with his legs. Chow Mu was determined to do everything he could to ensure that his opponent did not escape and die with him now. The martial artist was already losing consciousness due to strangulation, but he tried to remember at what point everything went wrong. Falling quickly down, the old man saw the lifeless bodies of his opponents, whom he had recently managed to overcome and throw off the cliff. He saw 4 corpses that were exactly alike and did not understand what was going on. Unfortunately, old man Afu was not destined to unravel Chow Mu's secret, because very soon he collided with the ground at great speed. Both the elderly man and the main character's clone died from falling from such a great height. Very soon the guy was revived again and announced with great joy that his task had been completed, but he was very upset when he saw that the mortality rating was only D rank. However, he began to think that he currently didn't have many skills and the chi wave hadn't opened yet, but he needed high grades in order to make a breakthrough faster. Unexpectedly, the boy received a reward in the form of the ability to set the resurrection point. Chow Mu believed that with this, he would be able to mislead his opponents with his unexpected appearance. Smiling slyly, the main character decided that he should try out this reward as soon as possible, and to do this, he should go to the mansion of the city's ruler. However, the guy was in no hurry to do this, because he decided that first he needed to return to the city and change clothes. After some time, the protagonist made his way into the kitchen of Guoyan's mansion and prepared to carry out his plan. The guy suddenly burst into the room and quickly attacked everyone present with a slingshot. The shots of small stones were enough to defeat all the men who were in the kitchen. Chow Mu himself was very pleased with his skill. However, the guy was in no hurry to go further, because he believed that he had already been resurrected many times, but had never celebrated this event, so he wished himself a pleasant appetite. The main character began to eat the delicious noodles that remained in the kitchen, but very soon he heard strange sounds behind the door, which attracted his attention. Carefully looking out onto the street, Chow Mu saw his old friend, who was laughing loudly and saying that first it was necessary for his pet to smell the smell and only then give him meat. It was the son of the city's ruler who was training his dog. The main character immediately thought that if someone entered the kitchen, he would be exposed. The guy was afraid that if he was discovered, he had no other choice but to die. Suddenly, someone kicked the door hard, but even after that, it did not open. Mr. Go loudly asked who was inside and ordered that the door be opened for him immediately. The scoundrel came here to feed his dog. He didn't notice that as soon as the door opened a little, someone's hand stuck out of it. Very soon the door slammed loudly again. The servants looked around in confusion but could not find Mr. Go anywhere. Meanwhile, the protagonist mercilessly threw the villain to the floor without worrying about his well-being. Soon the city lord's son saw Chow Mu, who looked very dangerous. Even the rascally dog was frightened by this sight. However, the guy still ordered his dog, whose name was Dahi, to attack the main character and eat him. The scoundrel was very surprised when he saw that Chow Mu was petting his dog without any fear, and apparently Dahi really liked it. After that, the guy pointed his spear at the villain and ordered him to remain silent and only answer his questions. Now he was interested in how many soldiers were in the mansion. The frightened boy meekly replied that he and his father had about a family of 12 soldiers, but in the mansion, there was also Zhou Wenwu, who also had his own subordinates. Chow Mu then asked if the scoundrel knew about the Wuji Association and the Emperor's secret journey. The son of the city ruler was very surprised to hear these questions, because he did not understand where the main character could have learned about all this. To this, Chow Mu rudely said that he was the only one asking questions here. The guy's appearance frightened the scoundrel even more, so he agreed to tell everything. The guy said that according to his father, the emperor could arrive in the city within 3 months. Then the main character asked if the route and time were already known. The son of the city ruler thought that he had to somehow get out of here so that he would not be killed, so he replied that he did not know such information and should go to his father's office. Chow Mu, hearing this, immediately understood that the guy specifically wanted to lure him out of here, but what he was most worried about was that he would not be killed but put in prison. Then it would be bad for him. Still, the main character said that the villain was not important to him at all, so he could kill him right now. Mr. Go was very scared, because this was not part of his plans. Unexpectedly, the guy promised to give Chow Mu not only the letter, but also a set of secret techniques in exchange for his life. It seemed that this offer interested the main character. He looked intently at the son of the city ruler and briefly asked what techniques were being discussed. The scoundrel said that the book, which was called Secret Fighting Techniques, was often used by his father during training. It described very good techniques. Chow Mu thought that the title of this book was very impressive, so he decided not to kill the guy yet in order to get what he wanted. Then the main character ordered the son of the city's ruler to show him the way and not to dare use any tricks. After some time, they arrived at Guoyan's office, where his son was trying to find the book and letter he needed. Chow Mu was surprised because such important information was not locked away. The scoundrel handed over the book and explained that no one else had come here except him and his father. The main character began to study the book, but was very surprised when he saw that there was no information about weapons or techniques. Chow Mu then asked if this was all that the scoundrel wanted to offer him, and then pointed his weapon at him again. The guy started to get nervous and quickly replied that perhaps his father's secret room could also contain something useful for the main character, and so he offered to show it. Chow Mu once again trusted his opponent, but again insisted that the boy not dare to use any tricks. The city ruler's son agreed with this. Soon the boy was the first to leave his father's office in order to look around and make sure that there was no one around. Right behind him was Chow Mu. This way he could control his opponent and kill him if necessary. At this time, the scoundrel was thinking that he needed to somehow get rid of Chow Lin, because he would stand behind him until he got what he wanted. Also, the son of the city ruler considered that in this situation, the only one who could help him was Zhou Wen. The guy kept thinking that if his father wasn't in the office, then he must have been the main one in the room, so he needed to get there to survive. Suddenly, the scoundrel saw a soldier at the end of the corridor who was heading about his business. This was that same Zhou Wen. The man saw Mr. Guo and so stopped to bow respectfully and greet him. Suddenly, he noticed that his master's face seemed to be trying to tell him something. The man immediately realized that something was wrong here. Then Zhou Wen saw an unfamiliar guy behind his master who immediately aroused his suspicion. At that moment, he felt as if he was struck by lightning from the realization of what was happening. The man immediately grabbed his sword because he understood that he had to fight a stranger. The son of the city's ruler was very glad that his subordinates finally understood everything. Suddenly, Zhou Wen became embarrassed and asked his master not to behave like that with him, because he was already old and also married. The scoundrel doesn't understand what his subordinate was talking about. The next moment, a sharp spear pierced through Mr. Guo's chest, indicating that Chow Mu was fed up with this whole show. Zhou Wen was apparently shocked because he did not understand at all what the reason was. The main character smiled slyly while the son of the city's ruler begged his subordinate to help him with all his might. Finally realizing what was happening, Zhou Wen loudly announced that a murderer had entered the mansion. Without wasting any time, the man rushed into the attack in order to eliminate the threat that posed a danger to the ruler of the city. Chao Mu was not at all averse to fighting Zhou Wen, so he allowed him to come closer and happily waited for his attack. As soon as the man approached a sufficient distance, the protagonist, without a shadow of a doubt, threw Mr. Go's body at his opponent, while simultaneously saying that it was not so easy to defeat him. At that moment, the guy heard one of the many doors open in front of him. An ominous aura immediately wafted out of the room, which was difficult to ignore. Chao Mu immediately turned to the side to confirm that it was exactly what he thought. The guy really wasn't mistaken. Guo Yan came out of the room, and judging by his appearance, he was already ready to mercilessly kill the uninvited guest. Guo Yan came out of the room. Judging by his appearance, he was already ready to mercilessly kill the uninvited guest. Chao Mu was ready for this. The ruler of the city was incredibly angry when he saw the main character and what he had done. At the same time, the guy was very happy that the man would finally attack him. Chao Mu was very surprised when he saw what happened next. In just a few seconds, Guo Yan approached the main character and began to attack him mercilessly. Fortunately, the guy managed to block the man's blow in time. However, the attack was so powerful that it caused a large explosion that threw the intruder far back. Chao Mu remained unharmed, but he now understood that this battle would not be easy. Despite his minor wounds, the protagonist loudly addressed Guo Yan and asked him not to miss the opportunity to kill him. The city's ruler, without saying a word, approached his enemy again in order to continue attacking him. At this moment, Chao Mu saw that a man's foot was already approaching his head. The guy couldn't avoid this blow, so he flew to the side at great speed. Guo Yan's skill greatly surpassed his. Despite this, the main character was still alive and could even get back on his feet. The guy with a big gap asked his opponent not to stop because it was impossible to defeat him with such force. This behavior made Guo Yan even more angry, so he again approached the protagonist with great speed in order to use all his skills on him. At the same time, the man, not holding back his anger, loudly asked why Chao Mu killed his son. To this, the guy, who continued to smile, briefly replied that good should always triumph over evil. The guy confidently continued to say that since the universe did nothing, he himself would decide everything. The next moment, Chao Mu managed to use a successful move and knock the city ruler down. Guo Yan was very unhappy that the protagonist was resisting, but now he needed to think about something else. The guy tried to attack the man with his drops, but he managed to get to his feet in time and dodge. This whole fight only fueled Chao Mu's interest, so now he was very happy about what was happening. Meanwhile, Guo Yan had already approached his opponent and swung his fist to attack him. The main character was not going to just stand there and wait for death, so without wasting any time, he decided to use his spear against the man. Unfortunately, the city's ruler foresaw this and was therefore able to move the guy's hand, which was holding the weapon, away from you in time. Along the way, the man said that after the death of the main character, he would hang his body on the city gates and leave it in the sun for 10 days so that even his son could see everything from heaven. After this, the city ruler hit Chao Mu in the stomach with all his might, causing him to fly far back and crash into the wall. Guo Yan's subordinates immediately understood what their master wanted from them as soon as they saw him extend his right hand to the side. The seriously wounded protagonist also understood what would happen next, so he only asked the man not to delay. With the same smile on his face, Chao Mu asked the city ruler to hit him just as hard again. The subordinate quickly dropped the sharp sword to his master. Guo Yan took the weapon out of its sheath and headed towards his wounded opponent. Without saying a word, the man made several sharp swings, but not in order to quickly kill the main character. Now the guy's hands were badly damaged, causing him to experience incredible pain and could no longer hold his spear. Zhou Wen, watching what was happening, was sure that his master would not leave his son's killer alone and would make him suffer for a long time before his death. Meanwhile, Guo Yan continued to torture the protagonist and decided that now was the time to strike the guy's leg so that he could not even walk. Surprisingly, as soon as the man tried to attack his opponent, he suddenly jumped up and quickly ran forward in order to save himself. Chao Mu couldn't run for long and fell to the ground, thinking along the way that Guo Yan wasn't going to kill him, but wanted to torture him for a long time, so he had to save himself. Despite his situation, the main character was not discouraged and joked that all this physical exertion had left him with a dry throat. Guo Yan was still very angry, but he admitted that the guy was an interesting opponent. He was very surprised that after everything that had happened to him, Chao Mu could still continue to speak, so the man decided to correct this misunderstanding. The main character only smiled at this, already understanding that he would have to take a desperate step right now. Unexpectedly, he used a heavenly demon skill that gave him the strength to quickly stand up, which couldn't help but surprise Guo Yan. The man did not believe what was happening. He was completely sure that his opponent should have died long ago after everything that had happened to him. Surprisingly, Chao Mu didn't even try to fight the man and instead quickly ran forward. Guo Yan immediately assumed that the protagonist was running towards the exit of the mansion. The man was overcome with a new wave of anger when he realized that the guy was just going to run away from him. In fact, the city rulers were wrong. Chao Mu slammed his head into the stone slab with all his might, only to die and then be reborn. Unfortunately, the main character was unable to do everything as he planned, and by accident he fell into a well, which surprised everyone who saw it. Guo Yan, as soon as he realized that his son's killer had fled in anger, threw down his sword and plunged it into the ground. The man looked at the well and couldn't believe that Chao Mu was able to escape in front of so many people. Without wasting any time, Guo Yan calmly ordered his subordinates to go to the Chao family and exterminate everyone they could find. The man also turned to Zhou Wen and ordered him to find Chao Lin alive or dead. The man humbly obeyed this order because he himself wanted to avenge the death of his master. Meanwhile, a group of people led by Song He was passing by the river outside the city of Yancheng. Suddenly, something caught the attention of the bandit leader, so he looked towards the river without hesitation. To his great surprise, the boy saw a bloody human body slowly floating downstream. Song He immediately recognized this man as Chao Lin, and so quickly ordered his subordinates to pull the boy to the shore. 3 days had passed since the incident. Rumors quickly spread throughout the city that Mr. Guo had died heroically in a fight with Chao Lin. Wanted posters for the main character were posted all over the city, promising a cash reward for any information about the guy. However, almost all the townspeople were favorably disposed towards Chao Lin, whose location remained unknown. Sister Shui, who also knew about what had happened, thought that Chao Mu had already managed to secure support once and hoped that this time everything would go just as smoothly. The girl was also very interested in the condition of the main character. She did not know that the worst was already behind her. The guy came to his senses and only wondered what had happened to him. He realized that back then, despite his attempt, he had not managed to die, so now his whole body ached due to numerous wounds and bruises. The guy also saw an excited Song He and his subordinates in front of him, so he didn't fully believe that everything that was happening was real. The leader of the bandits said that he heard about what Chao Lin did and believed that everyone was responsible for their own actions, so the guy could not thank him for saving him. Hearing this, the main character became very indignant and began to ask why Song He saved him, because he did not ask for such mercy towards himself. The guy quickly closed Chao Lin's mouth and asked him not to talk because now he only needed rest. However, this did not calm the main character down. Suddenly, blood began to flow from the guy's mouth. Despite this, he asked the leader of the bandits not to help him, Song. He was very surprised by this and thought that Chao Lin simply did not want to drag them to the bottom. The guy was delighted that even on the verge of death, the main character cared about others. Suddenly, the leader grabbed Chao Lin's hand, which caused him terrible pain, but he couldn't say it. Song. He sincerely said that he knew that the guy was feeling bad now, but he shouldn't have given up because while he was alive, there was hope for healing. Suddenly, the main character's hand fell limply onto the bed, indicating that the guy's strength was leaving him despite all his hopes. Chao Mu silently prayed to God to save him from Song He. The boy's deteriorating condition greatly alarmed the bandit leader. Be that as it may, 2 days later, the main character died in the arms of Song He, which could not help but upset all the bandits. The cries of despair and hopelessness could be heard far beyond the settlement. They were clearly heard by Chao Mu, who had already managed to reincarnate. Nevertheless, the guy was glad that he finally managed to die, even though it took a long time. Also, the main character, who had already managed to see his characteristics, was very pleased that his legendary death improved his rating. On top of that, one of the rewards for this death was that Chao Mu was able to reach the 7th rank of strength. After the resurrection, the guy had the feeling that about 10 years had already passed, and now he was determined to continue his path. While the main character was thinking about all this, he suddenly heard a strange rustling sound in the bushes behind him. It turned out that they were bandits who were under the command of Song He. They were suspicious of the man who seemed to be watching their settlement. Suddenly, the main character quickly approached them, and looking at the men with a stern gaze, asked who they were. In response to this, the bandits began to ask how the guy ended up there and what he was doing there. Chow Mu realized that the man did not recognize him and assumed that it was because after each resurrection he became a little older than before. Still, he calmly replied that his name was Chow Sen, and he came here to find his son Chow Lin. The protagonist asked if the men had seen him. The bandits were very surprised that Chow Lin's father was so young, because he looked no more than 30 years old. Chow Mu was pleased with this longevity effect, and recalled that Sister Shui had once told him that the effect of the immortality fist was very obvious, and thanks to the use of the technique, his longevity had increased. The main character advised men to go to bed early and get up early, and also to train hard and use magic in order to protect the body. Then he asked to take him to his son. After some time, the main character was already in the medical center of the Shanzhai settlement. By order of the bandit leader, Chow Lin's body had already been washed and placed in a coffin. Everything was ready for burial. Chow Sen comforted the inconsolable Song He by saying that his son died a hero, so there was nothing to worry about. The protagonist continued saying that the dead were finished, and so now it was necessary to hold on to the living. It seemed that these words made an impression on Song He. After this, the seemingly angry Chow Sen swore that he would take revenge on Guo Yan for killing his Chow Lin. Now the bandit leader understood why his deceased acquaintance was so determined. Suddenly, the main character turned to the guy and said that he saw that he cared about others, despite the fact that he was a bandit. So he advised them to cooperate in order to help people. At the same time, Chow Mu thought that now he could fight with Guo Yan, but he was not alone in the mansion, so he needed help. Song. He was thinking at this time that it would be great if Chow Sen could help get rid of the city ruler, so he agreed to cooperate with him. The leader then said that he was glad that the man knew at first glance that he was an unusual bandit, but he was unable to penetrate Guo Yan's mansion. Suddenly, Chow Sen reached out to Chow Lin's body, saying that the bandits could find him as soon as they made the right decision. Song He saw this and asked what the man was going to do. Chow Sen briefly replied that he wanted to protect this settlement because his son's body was being searched for by Guo Yan's people, so the man decided to take it from here so as not to interfere with the bandits' further plans. Song. He was shocked to hear this as he couldn't believe that Chow Sen was going to send his own son's body to the city's ruler. The bandit leader tried to dissuade the man and warned him that as soon as Chow Lin's body reached Guo Yan, he would hang it on the city gates, which would prevent the guy's soul from resting in another world. Hearing this, Chow Sen seemed to change his mind about it. He had another idea. He believed that his son's body would be an excellent bait that would force the city's ruler to leave his mansion. Song He was shocked by this idea and said that Chow Sen should not have taken his dead son as bait. To this, the man calmly replied that he wanted to kill Guo Yan so much that he was ready to go to any lengths to do so. These words impressed Song He so much that he didn't know what to say anymore. Still, the guy exhaled heavily while saying that he was proud of the man and his determination. After that, he promised to take care of Chow Lin's body, so for now it was better for the man to just wait for good news and not attract attention to himself. The protagonist agreed with this, while thinking that now his plan had become clearer. He only had to figure out how exactly to kill Guo Yan and how to further increase his assessment. Soon, a carrier pigeon flew into Mr. Guo's office and brought him the long-awaited message. The man looked at the bird with a piercing gaze as if he already understood what news awaited him. The letter stated that even the martial arts clan representatives were unable to find Chow Lin's body. The man had already begun to suspect that Chow Mu and Chow Lin were pretending when they said that there was a great family behind them. This guess turned out to be very plausible to him. At this moment, a subordinate approached Mr. Guo and reported that Chow Lin's body had been found. A doctor from Panishan City found the boy's body floating in the river and immediately reported it. Guo Yan, upon hearing this, immediately ordered his subordinate to immediately show him the body he had found. Soon the ruler of the city was brought a large coffin by his servants. The man, without wasting time, looked inside. He saw Chow Lin's corpse and confirmed that it was the guy he was looking for. Suddenly, one of the servants said that according to rumors, Chow Lin lived with the doctor for several days before dying in agony. Guo Yan was not happy with this and ordered that this doctor be checked. After that, the man said with an angry voice that tomorrow he would personally hang Chow Lin's body on the city gate. The very next day, by order of Goyana's city was blocked and entry to outsiders was strictly prohibited. Chow Mu, watching all this, was surprised at how aggressive the man was, since he closed the city in order to hang out a corpse. The guy assumed that the scoundrel was afraid that someone else from the Chow family would take revenge on him, but this did not interfere in any way, because he already had a plan. Not long before this, the protagonist said to Sun, "Heh, Even though they work together, they will have to act separately. The guy needed the bandits to get into the city, and when Go Yan will leave his estate, and they will have to start a diversion and distract the guards. At the same time, Chao Sen planned to go straight to Guo Yan and cut his throat. The bandit leader did not expect that Chao Sen was going to attack the villains alone, but the guy had already made up his mind and there was no point in trying to convince him otherwise. Son. He was delighted with his new acquaintance because the murder of Guo Yana was the most dangerous aspect of this plan. But despite this, the man still took it upon himself. Chao Sen quickly interrupted his interlocutor and explained that he simply did not want him to shine brighter than he did. Son. He didn't fully understand what that meant. Chao Sen explained that he always loved to show off in front of the crowd and also wanted the leader of the bandits to bring him several scrolls from the villain's estate. Next, Chao Sen reminded the boy that he found his son's body in the river, which meant that he must have fallen into the well in the middle of the Go estate. Yana. The main character continued to say that there should have been a passage that led to the mountains. He suggested that tomorrow's son he and his subordinates took advantage of this passage. The next day, the leader of the bandits reached the right place, where there really was a secret passage. Inspired by Sun, he turned to his comrades and announced that they would now infiltrate the Go estate. Yana and Chao will help Sen kill this thief. Meanwhile, the main character remained outside the city and waited for the right time to come for him. The guy was sure that Sun's team. He must have already found the secret passage, which meant it was time for him to move out. The guy looked down from a high cliff and assumed that if he threw himself from here, he would definitely be deader than dead. Without thinking twice, Chao Mu pushed off from the edge of the cliff and flew down fearlessly. During his free fall, the protagonist asked the system to return him to the point he had set earlier. After some time, some suspicious noise was heard in the outer area of the city. Chao Mu was very glad that he had the system, because with the help of its functionality, he was able to reincarnate right in the city, so the closed gates were not an obstacle for him. Having opened his weapons cache, the main character mentally addressed his enemy and warned him that he was already on his way to him. A few hours later, Go Yan, accompanied by his subordinates, left his estate and headed towards the city gates. People who found themselves in the villain's path were very surprised and did not fully understand what was happening. They assumed that it was the funeral procession of young Master Guo, but they did not raise the question of why the servants were not in mourning clothes. Unexpectedly, Go Yan stopped and loudly addressed his subordinates, ordering them to open the coffin and take out the body. At that very moment, one of the servants unceremoniously began to carry out this order. Without any respect, the man grabbed Chao's corpse. Mu grabbed him by the hair and began to pull him out of the coffin. Then the servant, without hiding his treacherous smile, showed the townspeople the corpse of the main character. People immediately realized that it was the corpse of the same guy who had hit young Master Go in the square and who had recently invaded Go's estate, Yana. Representatives of noble clans are dissatisfied, suggested that it was a demonstration and not a funeral ceremony. Many of them took it as a threat so that no one would even think of speaking out against Go Yana. However, some nobles supported the scoundrel and believed that Chao Mu deserved to die for invading the estate and killing Lord Guo's beloved son. Ordinary people began to be indignant and talk about the fact that Go Yan was a lawbreaker who caused famine in the city, but no one did anything about it. Go's subordinates. The Yan immediately reacted to this and pounced on the dissatisfied in order to make them regret what they said. Very soon a brawl began in the streets. Some accused others of being traitors, while others protested against the current order. Notable people who supported Go Yana watched everything that was happening with great pleasure and claimed that the poor were to blame for the fact that they were starving. The aristocrats laughed loudly and asked the poor not to come near them. They also suggested that these people should die quickly. Suddenly, the air was literally cut by a sharp swing of a sharp weapon that literally left one of the aristocrats without hair. It turned out that Chao was the reason for this. Sen, who had already reached the city square, stood up for the poor. Thanks to this, people were able to pounce on the aristocrat and teach this scoundrel a lesson for everything said above. The subordinate immediately reported to Go. Yanu told him that some kind of commotion was going on. The man did not attach any importance to this and only ordered that several rioters be caught and hung on the walls as a deterrent. The main character's spear flew over the people's heads with lightning speed and a whistle, carefully searching for its target. Go Yan sensed the approaching danger, but it was too late to do anything. The next moment, a sharp weapon struck the villain, causing blood to splash in all directions. Unable to stay in the saddle, the wounded Go Yan fell to the ground with a thud. The villain's servants immediately reacted and surrounded their master in order to protect him from the attacker, whom they had not yet even seen. Meanwhile, the man thought with horror that he had barely managed to dodge, and if he had hesitated even for one moment, the spear would have pierced his head. After this, the main character appeared before the villain and had something to tell him. Chao Sen, enveloped in a mysterious energy, declared that Go Yan not only killed his son but also dared to hang his corpse out for all to see. Then, pointing his weapon, the guy threatened that for this bloodthirsty act, the Chao family would repay the scoundrel 1,000-fold. Go Yan. He thought that Chao Lin was standing in front of him, so he was shocked and did not believe that this was actually happening. The main character, without wasting time, rushed at the man, simultaneously claiming that he was wrong because he was the father of the murdered guy. These words made the man very nervous. He did not expect to meet another representative of the Chao family, which, according to his subordinate, simply did not exist. Go Yan immediately ordered his guards to kill Chao Senya, after which they all rushed at the main character at once. Chao Sen was not at all worried about the superior numbers of his opponents and fearlessly continued to run forward. The guy with a smile on his face loudly demanded that the guards attack him and not even think about giving in. Soon, two sharp blades hit each other, causing the ringing sound of metal to echo throughout the area. The main character easily dealt with one enemy after another, not wanting to spare them at all. Some of the villains managed to get close to the guy from behind, but they could not cope with Chao's reaction. Senya. That is why very soon everyone who dared to confront the main character died from terrible bleeding wounds. The soldiers quickly realized that cold weapons could not stop Chao. Senya therefore decided to use bows. However, even dozens of flying arrows could not stop the main character, who wanted to achieve his goal. After this, the guards decided to resort to a battle formation in order to somehow restrain their enemy. To counter this threat, Chao Senyu had to gather all his strength and concentrate it in his weapon. The next moment, with one sharp blow, the main character managed to send a stream of energy into the soldiers that completely destroyed their battle formation. Some guards were shocked by what was happening and called the guy a monster, but others argued that there was no need to panic because they hadn't even sent their strongest warriors into battle yet. Hearing this, Zhou Wen loudly ordered the soldiers not to retreat and continue the battle. Meanwhile, Go Yan thought about why the main characters didn't even think about giving up and couldn't believe that no one from the Chao family was afraid of death. In addition, the man noticed that this Chao Sen was incredibly similar to Chao Lin, but he believed that even between father and son, there could not be such a resemblance. The main character continued to fight and said with a broad smile that Go Yan won't be able to leave here alive. Zhou Wen immediately decided to intervene in this battle, having previously asked his master to quickly leave here while he detained the main character. The man then attacked Chao with lightning speed. Senya, however, continued to smile and was able to easily block this attack. Looking at his opponent with a crazy look, the main character said that he came here to avenge his son, but what the man was doing here was unclear. An angry Zhou Wen demanded that Chao Sen remain silent because his son had killed the younger Master Guo and therefore deserved to die. To this, the main character, continuing to maintain his image, said that his son only rendered a service to the residents of this city, who were being mocked by the scoundrel. Zhou Wen continued to demand that Chao Sen fell silent and did not insult the young master anymore. Meanwhile, the man continued to swing his sword. The protagonist easily dodged all these attacks and soon noticed that Zhou Wen was already exhausted. That's why Chao Senyu had no trouble hitting his opponent, plunging his spear deep into the man's shoulder. In order to stop the main character, Zhou Wen grabbed the spear tightly with both hands, while enduring incredible pain. The embittered man gritted his teeth and declared that the main character would never take another step forward, and for this, he was ready to give his life. Chao Sen praised the man for his loyalty, calling him a dog, but expressed regret that his master was a scoundrel. The soldiers watching this were shocked and couldn't believe that Zhou Wen, who was a 7th-class warrior, couldn't hold out against Chao Senya even 10 seconds. Suddenly, Guo appeared behind Zhou Wen. Yan armed himself with a sword and praised his subordinate for trying hard. The next moment, the villain, lightning fast, directed his sword forward, without thinking at all about the consequences. It turned out that Go Yan deliberately attacked his loyal subordinate in order to pierce his body with his sword and hit the protagonist. Chao Sen was shocked by what happened and silently looked at his blood as if he didn't believe that he was wounded. In the end, the guy admitted that the villain had managed to outwit him, and this time the victory was his. Slowly closing his eyes, the protagonist promised that next time Go Yan will be dead. After that, Chao's lifeless body, Senya, fell to the ground with a bang along with Zhou Wen's corpse. There was absolute silence all around. Go Yan was very happy about his victory and claimed that his opponent was a dud, and even if there were 1 million people in the Chow family, he would kill every single one of them. The scoundrel, who had lost his teeth due to impunity, laughed loudly for some time and declared that no one could stop him. Meanwhile, Chow Mu had already managed to reincarnate, and the first thing he did was look at the rating of this death. It turned out that he had reached rating A and was able to freely distribute his points. In addition, the system informed the main character that his life expectancy had been shortened by 30 years, which he did not expect at all. Chow Mu knew that if he achieved mastery in the ability of the Fist of Immortality, he would be able to increase the quality and duration of life, so he decided to invest all his points in it. The guy believed that this way his problem would be solved and he would be halfway to immortality. Chow Mu was grateful to the system for his high mortality rate, but he no longer had time to sit around here because he was waiting for him. Taking his weapon, the protagonist decided that he would deal with the reduction in his lifespan after getting rid of Go Yana. Meanwhile, one of the subordinates was telling his master in an alarmed voice the bad news that something was wrong in his estate. The man said that an unknown group of people appeared in the middle of the yard, as if out of thin air, and taking advantage of the lack of guards, killed everyone and took control of the entire estate. Go Yan was shocked by this news. All the events that had happened in his life recently had only caused him to become furiously angry. Go Yan, upon hearing the bad news, immediately ordered his subordinate to immediately call everyone together and go to the estate. At that moment, the scoundrel noticed that armed men began to surround him and his soldiers. The rioters had no intention of letting the man go so easily and wanted to take revenge on him for the hero Chow. Sen, go even more angry, Yana, from which he could no longer contain his emotions. The villain, without a doubt, loudly ordered his soldiers to kill the people, leaving no one alive. The soldiers had to obey this order. They quickly put arrows into their bows and took aim. A moment later, dozens of sharp arrows flew at the boastful townspeople who only wanted justice. At the very last moment, something quickly rushed past the people from behind and they began to wonder. It turned out that the hero Chow was alive and came here to save the townspeople from the tyranny of Guo Yana. The villain was shocked when he saw the main character and did not understand how this was possible because he had just recently killed a man with his own hands. Chow Sen, without explaining anything, rushed towards Guo Yan, wanting to kill him. People supported him in this, so they ran after him to help. One of the soldiers was frightened by what was happening, and therefore asked his comrade what they should do now, since the forces were clearly not on their side. No one answered. The soldiers saw that everyone had disappeared somewhere. They didn't know how they were supposed to fight the main character, and generally doubted whether he was a human being. Go's subordinates Yana threw down their weapons because they were not ready to risk their lives. Besides, they did not want to kill innocent people on the orders of a scoundrel. Go Yan, seeing all this, demanded that the soldiers return and carry out his order. He threatened that anyone who disobeyed would be executed, but the soldiers continued to run away. Just at that moment, the scoundrel noticed that mortal danger was already approaching him, so he no longer had the opportunity to scold his subordinates. Still, the man managed to react in time and block the main character's powerful attack. Chow Sen looked straight into the eyes of his opponent and confidently said that all this was the result of his actions. The man also threatened that the scoundrel would die now. Go Yan was very angry when he heard this and asked if the main character really thought he could defeat him. The next moment, the man deftly released his weapon and attacked Chow with lightning speed, Senya, from which drops of blood developed on the sides. It turned out that the scoundrel managed to leave a small scratch on the man Chow's cheek. Sen believed that his opponent had incredible energy and could not believe that he remained so strong even after being injured. After that, the villain dealt several more precise blows, simultaneously accusing the main character of destroying everything that he had built over many years, which is why he wanted to kill everyone from the Chow family. Go Yan had incredible speed, so Chow Sen was unable to resist his attacks. The villain's sword easily cut into the man's flesh and left bleeding wounds from which the protagonist lost strength. In the end, Chow Sen fell to his knees. It seemed that he could no longer continue this battle. Seeing this, Go Yan thought that everything was already over, and all that was left for him to do was take his second victory for the day. Chow family representative once again. Suddenly, Chow was exhausted. Senyu managed to stop his opponent's weapon with his bare hand without worrying about a new bleeding wound. Without letting go of the villain's blade, the protagonist quickly rose to his feet. The force seemed to have returned to him again. Go Yan, seeing this, began to get very nervous before assuming that the main character was able to figure out his technique despite the fact that too little time had passed. To this, Chao Sen smiled slyly and said that if this was their first fight with the villain, he really wouldn't be able to cope with this riddle. The next moment, the main character, not wanting to hide anything anymore, confidently declared that this was already their third meeting. Go Yan was very surprised by what he heard and for some time did not understand at all what Chao Sen meant. The scoundrel was not destined to find out all the answers because his life was drawing to an end. The protagonist mercilessly thrust a spear into the body of the villain he had wanted to kill for so long. As soon as the man pulled out the weapon, a stormy stream of blood gushed out from the fresh wound, and a sharp pain spread throughout Go's body. Yana. Only in the last seconds of his life did the scoundrel realize that all this time there was no Chao Sen was not there, but he was fighting with Chao Lin. The main character watched with a satisfied smile on his face as his enemy died. He was glad to see this sight because it took him 3 whole attempts. After Go's lifeless body, Yan fell to the ground. People immediately announced that the villain had died and his killer was the hero Chao Sen. For some time, people loudly proclaimed the name of the main character and thanked him for his feat. Chao liked all this very much. Moo. Suddenly, the guy's expression changed and a lot of blood started to appear on his forehead. Unable to stand on his feet any longer, the main character fell to the ground with a crash, which greatly frightened everyone around him. While still conscious, the guy thought about how good it was to die under the applause of the crowd. He believed that this death was worthy of another A rank. Suddenly, Sun appeared in front of the main character. He was very worried about Chao's condition. Senya and therefore asked if everything was okay with him. The leader of the bandits immediately took the man in his arms and promised that this time he would be able to save the hero's life. Chamu did not want this at all, but due to his powerlessness, he could not resist Song's desire. Help. After some time, the main character came to his senses thanks to timely medical assistance, but this did not make him happy at all. He looked after his comrade and was amazed at how incredible his body was, as it was able to recover very quickly. Then the guy said that Chao Sen's chi channels were completely damaged, and there was not even a tenth of the internal energy left, so it would take some time to find a cure. Sun. He asked the protagonist not to despair and promised that he would do everything to cure his Chao. Sen mentally asked the bandit leader to just leave him alone. The main character decided that he needed to escape from here quickly, so getting out of bed, he said that he would like to go outside and breathe some fresh air. Unexpectedly, Sun. He asked if the protagonist really wanted to find Chao's body. Mu was taken aback by this question, but quickly remembered that after the fight with Go Yanem's corpse was lying on the street. Sunhei explained that he meant the fake corpse that the main character, according to the guy, used to deceive Goyana. The guy did not deny this and asked where that body was now. Sunhei, he said that they buried him and planted chrysanthemums on his grave so that the city's residents would never forget this sacrifice. After that, Chao Sen asked if there were any Song martial arts clans around the city. He had never heard of anything like this. However, the guy knew for sure that in the Haiyan prefecture, which was located in the north, there were still several such clans. Now, the main character understood why he was drawn to the north from the moment he began to study the legendary mastery of martial arts. Next, Chao Sen stated that he would already be setting off on his journey. Sun He suggested that the man stay a little longer so that his wounds would heal at least a little. To this, the main character replied that it was pointless to stay here, but on the way north, he could possibly find the necessary medicine. In fact, the guy just wanted to leave quickly. Soon. I realized that Chao. He couldn't convince Senya, but he asked him not to rush, because he wanted to write a letter of recommendation for him at the end. Chao Sen was very surprised when he learned that the leader of the bandits had an acquaintance named Shen Chin He, who was a government official and who could help find a job. Sun He explained that they had worked together a long time ago, but he didn't want attention to it tomorrow. The main character asked the guy to write in the letter that his name was Chao Mu. His name is Chao. Sen was associated with the killer Goyana, which could attract unwanted attention. The bandit leader handed the man a letter and wished him a safe journey. Chao Sen promised that he would repay the guy for his kindness. After this, the main character suggested to his comrade to divide their loot equally. It turned out that in the Go estate, Yana had just a huge amount of money. The whole room was literally littered with gold coins and jewelry. Sunhee was shocked and couldn't believe that the scoundrel stole all this from ordinary people. According to the guy, Goyan was worse than any monster. At this time, Chao Sen thought only about the opportunities that all this money gave, and was very glad that he was lucky enough to touch it. The main character quickly pulled himself together and turned to the leader of the bandits and said that he could take all this money for himself. ETO Sun. He didn't expect it at all. The protagonist continued to say that many of the townspeople were dying of hunger, so they could not leave everything as it was. The man asked Sun. He spent the money on food for the poor. Also, Chao Sen warned that the government could soon send a new manager to the city who could be even worse than Guo. Yana. That's why the man believed that it was the bandit leader who should lead the city. He wanted Sun. He used this opportunity to achieve his dream, and he was shocked by his comrade's words, and for a while he couldn't say anything in response. Soon the guy began to very emotionally thank the main character and show respect to him in every possible way. However, Chao Sen asked him to calm down because he was not going to leave here empty-handed. Chao Sen, with a satisfied smile on his face, showed his interlocutor a small book from Go's personal library. Yana directly stated that he was taking her with him. Sun. He praised the man for his choice of literature, because it was a book about the endless path of the rebellious Yang, which was a very ancient technique. Chao's enthusiasm, Senya quickly disappeared because he learned that this technique was based on the cultivator's virginity. The protagonist could not lose even a drop of his Yang energy if he wanted to practice this technique. He did not understand how a young man in his prime could endure this. Then Sun. He took out a small scroll and offered the protagonist to learn the technique of transforming a mortal body. This intrigued the man. The scroll described many techniques of varying levels of complexity. At the very beginning, it described in detail the art of makeup and techniques that allow you to slightly change the length of the bones. If a person managed to reach the end of this book in his studies, then he would discover techniques that would allow him to change his flesh, thanks to which he could become any person. Sun. He warned that the text of this book was very complex, and the main character would need a lot of time to understand it. So he suggested that the man not rush with his departure to the north. Chao Sen had no intention of staying here for even a minute, so he abruptly snatched the book from Sun's hands. He ran away, thanking the guy for his help. The leader of the bandits looked at the main character with a smile and thought that someday they would meet again, and then he would ask him to become part of his plan. After some time, the main character had already reached a large, lonely house that was hidden in the forest near the city. Chao Mu quickly ran inside and loudly called out to Sister Xue, who, as it turned out, was supposed to be waiting for him here. Unfortunately, no one answered. The guy looked around carefully and assumed that the girl had already left this place. A man appeared behind the main character and slowly extended his hand towards him, as if trying to grab him. It turned out that it was Sister Xue. She closed the guy's eyes and said that it hadn't even been 7 days yet, so she couldn't go anywhere. Chao Mu, with a smile on his face, replied that today was the 7th day, and that it was today that he defeated Go Yana. The main character suddenly noticed that something was wrong with the girl. She seemed to be worried about something. Sister Xue seemed to be about to explain what made her feel awkward, but she quickly fell silent. Then the guy said that he was going to Haiyan Prefecture to find the missing part of the Immortal Fist technique, so he and the girl would have to break up again. Sister Xue was very surprised by what she heard and could not believe such a coincidence because she was also going there. Chao Mu immediately assumed that the girl simply missed him and wanted to go with him, but she explained that in Haiyan Prefecture there were many families of immortals with whom it would be very useful for her to get to know. Chao Mu thought that it was just an excuse, because of which the girl was offended and without thinking twice set off on her way. The main character had to quickly follow her. After some time, the guy arrived at Shen's house. He introduced himself and said that he came to see the man on Song's instructions. Haiyan prefectural official asked with displeasure if Song He actually recommended Chao Mu. The letter stated that the main character was seriously injured, but he looked quite healthy. It turned out that the guy died on the way here and was able to reach the initial level of the immortal path of the immaculate Yang and the transformation of the mortal body, but of course he couldn't talk about it. Next, Shen Qin. He asked where Sun was now. The main character said that he lived in the mountains and it was incredibly difficult to find him, but he himself came across the guy by accident. This whole story only raised more questions for the official, but he didn't want to ask Chao any more questions, much more so because he himself did not want to tell more. The man looked thoughtfully at Sun's letter. He remembered that if it weren't for the healing recipe the guy wrote down for him, he would have died many years ago. Since Sun. He vouched for the main character Shen Qin. He believed that he was a reliable person, so he offered him the choice of becoming either a clerk or a constable. Without thinking twice, the main character decided to become a constable because he believed that then he would be able to move freely around the city, thanks to which he would be able to find out more about the fighting clans and families. After some time, the main character changed his clothes and met his new colleagues. The constables were very surprised by the appearance of Chow in their ranks. They didn't understand how he, who appeared out of nowhere, was able to achieve this position so quickly. Suddenly, someone turned to the constables and loudly demanded that they remain silent. Chief Constable Yin He. She said that now they were all on the same team, so her subordinates should be more polite with their new colleague. Then, without wasting time, the girl suggested moving on to the matter that concerned the infamous monster Wu Chang. All the constables were struck by lightning when they heard about this monster. It was clear that this topic was very serious for them. At the same time, the main character was perplexed and did not understand at all what was being discussed. Yin He said that this monster was raging in the city and had already managed to take many lives. According to rumors, Wu Chang was a type of monster that fed on the energy of death. The girl continued saying that many warriors tried to deal with this monster, but it turned out to be much stronger, and even the 5th and 6th class fighters did not survive after meeting it. The head constable also informed his subordinates that they would have to work with the Xianstian clan, which attracted Chow's attention. Mu. The protagonist immediately remembered that after the Chow family was destroyed, the Xiantian temple was built on their land. The guy thought that this clan was definitely somehow connected with the association. Chow Mu. He assumed that perhaps it was from this clan that he would be able to find out about the second part of the Immortal Fist, and if he was lucky, he would be able to find other cultivation techniques. At the same time, the other constables were not at all thrilled with the case, and did not understand why it was entrusted to them. The main character asked what the reason for such a reaction was, and then one of his colleagues said that they were simple guards and would definitely not be able to cope with the monster. The man continued to say that even their leader, although she was the strongest of them, was only a 7th grade warrior, and the protagonist realized that they were being forced to do work for which they were incompetent. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, someone's voice was heard asking everyone not to worry. Raising his head, the main character saw a girl flying across the sky on a huge bird made of paper. Everyone present was shocked because it was the Moon Fairy from the Xiantian clan. Having landed carefully on the ground, the girl immediately declared that the constables would not have to fight the monster. According to the fairy, they just needed to track down the monster and tell her, but without their help, she definitely couldn't cope. The constables were delighted with the girl and thanked her for worrying about them. The men, who were now filled with enthusiasm, promised that they would definitely find the monster. The chief constable was surprised that her subordinates agreed to these terms so quickly. Her colleague thought that the role of being the fairy's errand boy suited them perfectly. At the same time, the protagonist was thinking about why the Moon Fairy couldn't do everything herself, because such a task was very simple for an immortal. The guy even assumed that the Xiantian clan was trying to deceive the state chamber. The fairy continued to say that this monster fed on the energy of death, so it would most likely be found near hospitals or prisons. It was also possible to use a group of dying people as bait. The constables felt uneasy about the girl suggesting that they lure out the monster using living people and thought that it was too much. The Moon Fairy didn't see any problem with this because these people would soon die anyway, so before they died, they could serve for the good of society. Suddenly, the chief constable asked what the fairy was going to do after catching the monster. The girl answered that she would take him to the clan where, for his sins, he would remain to serve them until the end of his days. Yin He was very outraged by what he heard, because this monster killed many innocent people. The girl was determined that the one who committed the murder should pay for it with his own life. The Moon Fairy calmly replied that such measures only concerned commoners and not immortals. Monsters and demons were just under their jurisdiction. Chow intervened in this conversation. Mu, who attracted the attention of the fairy in order to ask her something. The main character, with a smile on his face, asked what would happen if they accidentally killed the monster when they discovered it. The chief constable was very surprised by this question, but now she too was interested in what the fairy's answer would be. The Moon Fairy repeated once again that it was very dangerous to fight this monster, so the constables only had to tell her when they found it. Then everything would be fine. Then the guy asked what they should do if the monster chased them and they couldn't pass the message to Chow Mu, assumed there was a possibility that they would kill him. Now the main character was very interested in whether there was any reward from the immortals for this work. For example, an entertaining tour of their clan. The Moon Fairy, hearing all this, only smiled but was not going to leave the main character without an answer. The next moment, The girl categorically declared that the lands of the immortals would not tolerate the feat of plebeians. Xiaomu immediately thought about how arrogant these immortals were, and suggested that he would have to find another way to investigate the Xiantian clan. The fairy then suggested that they end their conversation and finally gave the constables 3 days to search for the monster. After this, the girl jumped on her bird and quickly flew away into the distance, disappearing behind the clouds. The constables immediately turned to the commander and asked what they were supposed to do, since they wanted to use the dying people. Yin He replied that they were not obliged to obey the orders of the immortals. The girl ordered her subordinates to explore the city, looking under every stone, and immediately inform her if they still managed to find something. Chao Mu was about to leave to carry out the order with his new colleagues, but the chief constable suddenly asked him to stay for a while. Yin. He already understood that the protagonist definitely had good skills, so she was interested in whether he was just teasing the fairy or whether he was really ready to kill this monster. Chao Mu replied with a smile that the commander had overestimated him because he had simply asked the fairy an obvious question. The chief constable, of course, didn't believe the guy, so she asked him absolutely calmly if he was serious. Chao Mu gave a short positive answer to this. Then the girl asked the guy to go after the other constables. As he left, the main character smiled slyly and thought that he himself could become bait for a monster that fed on the energy of death. Some time passed. It was deep night, but the lights were still on in the Tavern of Drunken Immortals, which was located in the eastern part of the city. The mysterious man stood silently at the window and watched the passers-by as if he was waiting for someone. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The man immediately allowed his guest to enter. The winged fish guard named Chu Xin respectfully addressed his master and reported that he had news about Song. Hearing this, the man began to frantically twist the jade ring on his finger and ask his subordinate to tell him everything he had learned. The guy said that there was someone named Chao Mu reported to the State House and was appointed constable. This guy provided a letter of recommendation from Song. Chu Xin continued to say that the letter did not reveal the details, but there were rumors that Song he could have taken the path of immortality. What he heard did not impress the man at all. He considered that these rumors were just empty talk. Knew well that Sun. He hated immortals with every fiber of his being, so there was definitely no point in the guy becoming one of them. The guard recalled that for decades Song he had remained silent and now suddenly recommended someone, which meant that Chao Mu was not an easy person. The man still asked to arrange a meeting with the main character. Meanwhile, Kang Shui, as planned, went to meet the local noble families. The girl who received her in the big temple said that Kang Shui was still a child when they saw her last. 10 years had already passed, but the elder was glad that fate had brought them together again. Lin Lin was well aware of what had happened to the Chao family, but now she was suggesting that the girl who was born with exceptional spiritual perception develop this talent. Lin Lin offered to let Kang Shui stay with her since she was so reluctant to join the immortal clans. Kang Shui thought for a moment and then agreed to accept the elder's proposal. At the same time, the girl never stopped thinking for a moment about what Chao was doing now. Mu. As it turned out, the main character for some reason was handcuffed and put behind bars. The guard demanded that the guy behave appropriately, because with such tricks, even 10 lives would not be enough for him. Chao Mu asked the man not to worry and assured him that he had no intention of running away. At the same time, the main character smiled slyly and thought that this was exactly where he belonged. A little earlier in the Jade Tea House, the owner attracted the attention of his customers with a loud knock. The man was very emotional in telling the story of how the hero Chao Sen killed Go with one swing of his spear. Yana then effectively walked off into the sunset. Chao Mu, who heard all this, did not understand why people were discussing this event while a monster was walking around their city. The main character was upset because he thought that he would be able to talk to people here about the monster, but instead, he had already spent half an hour gossiping about himself. Suddenly, a stranger approached the boy and asked if the constable of the Heian prefecture had been listening to gossip in the tavern during working hours and neglecting his duties. It turned out that this was the same man who wanted to meet the main character. He was, of course, accompanied by his faithful guard. Chao Mu asked with displeasure if the stranger was sure that he knew how he should work. The man immediately replied that he was just joking. Then the guy noticed that a far from unusual person was standing in front of him, because even from his aura it was clear that he was a high-ranking official who was accompanied by an equally strong martial arts master. After this, the main character casually asked why the strangers decided that he was just lounging around here and advised them to ask the emperor the same question. Chushin immediately took these words as insults and became very angry, but his master stopped him. Then the man slowly took out his fan and said that he was very curious to find out something from the main character. Chow thought he was. Mu was the emperor of this country. The main character immediately thought that it would be better for the emperor to be dead already. Otherwise, he would have to kill him himself. Chow Mu remembered that the emperor was supposed to pass through the city of Yanchen, but for some reason this did not happen. Also, the guy did not understand why for the murder of Guo Yan hasn't put a bounty on him yet. Suddenly, the guy assumed that there were probably government officials standing in front of him now, so he had to choose his words very carefully. The main character understood that if he insulted the emperor, he would definitely be sentenced to death, and then he would become known throughout the empire, and his rating would become simply incredible. That's why Chow Mu began by loudly declaring that the current emperor of this country was the ruler of the millennium. These words immediately attracted the attention of everyone present, who instantly forgot about their business and began to closely watch what was happening. The stranger, who seemed to like this answer, asked if the boy had overestimated their ruler. The main character began to say that when the emperor ascended the throne, he took the nickname Endless World. According to the guy, this meant complete and shameful submission to the immortals. Chushin was shocked by what he heard and couldn't believe that the protagonist dared to call his master a coward. Responded to his interlocutor's words that the immortals were an indestructible force that was impossible to resist, so the emperor had to compromise. Chow Mu confidently replied that compromise was the lot of weak and helpless people and could only be justified when retreat was made in order to accumulate strength and strike back. However, according to the main character, this was not the case because everyone knew the city of Yancheng precisely because people were dying of hunger there. The guy loudly declared that the ruler knew well about this situation, but did nothing, just like the State House. Chow Mu. He knew that the emperor ruled in the name of heaven, but he believed that people were just meat for him, which he was ready to use up if the immortals so desired. He once again insisted that the inhabitants of the empire were suffering, but the state chamber could do nothing to help them, and perhaps there were already dozens of cities like Yancheng. After this, the main character said that nothing else could be expected from the Son of Heaven, who put himself above other people. These words clearly upset the stranger. Suddenly, the angry Chushin, unable to bear all that was said above, loudly slammed the table and declared that Chow Mu was talking nonsense. The main character also got angry and stated that everything was known, that the emperor danced to the tune of the immortals and even built a residence for them in every major city. As a result, a verbal altercation began between the guys. People who witnessed this did not understand where the fearless young man who dared to publicly declare his dissatisfaction with the emperor came from. The man, meanwhile, thought that the guy was obviously asking for trouble and therefore assumed that he had revealed his identity and was doing all this on purpose. He regretfully assumed that the former Minister of Justice's son was of the same opinion. He, who preferred to die rather than surrender to the immortals, but now things were exactly as he predicted. Chushin drew his sword and declared that according to the laws of the empire, a person who insulted the emperor should be executed. Chow Mu, with a smile on his face, replied that he would not go back on his words and was ready to take responsibility for them. The man realized that for some reason the guy wanted to be killed. That is why the man suddenly stopped his subordinate and ordered him to leave the main character alone. As they were about to leave, the men said one last thing. Chow Mu didn't understand anything about government and just wanted to attract attention. The main character was shocked by this outcome and did not understand how this was possible because he got into this whole situation and after everything he said, they were just going to let him go. The guy mentally asked his interlocutors not to leave and was ready to utter even more rude insults towards the emperor. Suddenly, a guard appeared in the tavern and loudly asked who was here, Chow Mu. The main character answered this question with great enthusiasm, hoping that his idea could still be realized. This is how the guy ended up in prison. He constantly asked about when exactly he would be executed and asked for it to be done quickly, which caused confusion among the guards. In the end, they once again demanded that Chow Mu did not act up. They assured him that all the prisoners here were death row prisoners, so he would not be able to escape. The main character had to put up with the agonizing wait for his participation, but he was glad that he ended up in a death row prison. The guy thought that the monster was just feeding on the energy of people like him. Suddenly, the dark dungeon was pierced by a loud cough from one of the prisoners. To the man who sat next to Chow, my back was clearly not feeling well, so his cough would not stop. In addition, This man looked very scared and tried not to look up. It turned out that a black shadow in the shape of a huge cat was looking right at him, its eyes glowing brightly in the darkness. Its meowing echoed throughout the dungeon. An elderly man sentenced to death sat alone in his cell and awaited his fate, completely oblivious to what was happening around him. Suddenly, the silence of the dark dungeon was broken by the quiet meowing of a cat that appeared here as if out of nowhere. The old man was surprised by the appearance of this animal because he did not understand how it got there, but the cat made him smile. The old man decided to release the cat because, in his opinion, with the aura of death that had spread here, this place was no better than hell, and even the local rats were not worth the animal's consumption. Suddenly, the elderly man fell with a crash onto the stone floor as he was completely exhausted due to his illness. Chow Mu immediately asked in an anxious voice if everything was okay with the old man. The stranger assured him that there was no need to worry. He then proudly told that he was once known as a holy thief who stole from the rich to give to the poor, and for this became famous throughout the world. The old man also said that when he was young, he could stand up to hundreds of rounds against an incredibly strong martial artist. But everything changed after one stupid mistake. The old man continued telling incredible stories about his life for some time until he began to quickly lose strength. In the end, the old man died and his lifeless body fell to the floor with a crash. Chow Mu immediately began to call the intern for help. Then the main character saw how that same cat slowly approached the old man's corpse. The next moment, an ominous energy began to emanate from the animal and rushed in a stormy stream towards the elderly man. Chow Mu, seeing this, immediately jumped up from his seat and loudly demanded that the cat stop all this. Having passed the iron bars, the guy approached the old man and put his finger to his nose to check his breathing. Only at this moment, Chow Mu, I realized that the elderly man had already died. Looking at the cat, the guy remembered that, according to the chief constable, the energy of death increased the monster's strength. The main character assumed that this little kitten was the very same monster Wu Chang. Meanwhile, the animal was already looking at Chow Mu with a bloodthirsty look, clearly wanting to profit from the guy. The main character was absolutely ready to accept this fight, so he prepared for the monster's attack. The cat was surprised by Chow's fearlessness. Mu even hesitated for a moment because he was clearly seeing something like this for the first time. The main character continued to taunt the monster with a smile on his face and ask him to attack him quickly. In the end, the ferocious monster fulfilled the boy's wish and, growling loudly, rushed at him, baring his sharp teeth and claws. Chow Mu was very pleased and solemnly announced the beginning of a life-or-death battle. Suddenly, the cat took its harmless form and leaned on the arm of the main character, who clearly did not expect anything like this. Chow Mu did not understand what was happening and was completely unhappy that his expectations were once again not met. Chow Mu, having gone inside himself, began to try to drive away the cute cat, asking various questions along the way that he shouldn't have been a bloodthirsty monster. Despite all attempts, the cat remained in the boy's arms and continued to purr, clearly pleased with his position. Unexpectedly, the main character suggested that this cat was so attached to him because he would soon die. At this moment, Chow Mu heard a stranger's voice in the distance of the dark corridor, asking the guard to take him to a prisoner named Chow. While the guy was quickly returning to his cell, the guard informed his master that this man had ended up here because he had publicly insulted His Majesty. The man also claimed that no criminal had ever managed to escape from this prison. At the same time, Chow Mu asking when he would be executed and asked to somehow speed up this process. Surprisingly, the noble gentleman began to politely explain to the main character that there had been a misunderstanding and that he would now get him out of this cage. Chow Mu, hearing this, could not contain his emotions and, knocking down the doors of his cell, began to be indignant because he had tried so hard to get here and now they wanted to let him out. Suddenly, there was absolute silence in the dungeon. The main character came to his senses and realized what he had done, and the guard and his master began to get nervous from what they had just seen. However, the official repeated again that they were to blame for not examining the case properly, and therefore even if the guy had run away, no one would have stopped him. After this, the man, continuing to be nervous, thought that the main character not only did not run away after breaking the bars, but also remained calm, as if he was patronized by a very influential person. Unexpectedly, Chow Mu turned to the official and decided to ask him just one question. The man immediately prepared to listen. The guy asked if they would bury the old man who hit his head and died. The official immediately assured the main character that they would hold a proper ceremony for him. After that, Chow Mu was only interested in where the cat had gone. The huge black one indicated that he was still somewhere here. After some time, the guy arrived at the Shen estate. Chin He, who already knew about everything, was very unhappy. The man scolded the main character for being arrested in a constable's uniform, and let me remind you, all his actions were directly reflected in the state chamber. Chow Mu began to justify himself and explained that he allowed himself to be arrested only in order to conduct an investigation in prison and did not act out of selfish motives. This answer seemed to convince the official, who immediately calmed down as soon as he heard it. This turned out to be a false opinion. The man demanded that the guy not make a fool of him and asked if it was really possible to go to prison only for insulting the emperor. Unexpectedly, the educational process was interrupted by Yin He, who also wanted to speak out about this situation. The girl insisted that Mr. Shen had to use his authority to pull Chow out, move from prison, and even promise a reward to another official. The guy thanked the man for his help, but thought that Shen didn't need it at all. Chin. He asked the protagonist to be more careful with his words and actions next time. Then the man thought about what the official had said about the order to release Chow. Mu, even without his intervention, had already been handed over to the guardian by the winged fish, Shen Qin. He knew very well that this faction was directly subordinate to His Majesty, so this was probably an order from the emperor himself. He didn't believe at all that the emperor himself asked a commoner to insult him in public. The official even suggested for a moment that the emperor enjoyed this kind of thing. Then the man suggested getting down to business and directly asked the main character if he had seen the monster. Chow Mu said that the monster looked like a small tricolor kitten. He appeared next to the dead prisoner and absorbed the energy of death, after which he grew to a size exceeding that of a human. Yin He believed that it really was the Wuchang monster, because on some of the victims there were traces of claws similar to those of a cat or tiger. Unexpectedly, the main character suggested that perhaps Wuchang had nothing to do with it. This surprised the girl because she did not understand what the guy meant. Chow Mu suggested that perhaps the cat was only absorbing the energy of an already deceased person and did not kill anyone himself. The chief constable was shocked by this guess and asked if the boy really meant that there was another monster. Meanwhile, high in the mountains, the peaks of which were pierced by the clouds, a loud roar of a predatory beast was heard, as if preparing to attack. A flying white tiger with wings growled aggressively at two girls who seemed to be trying to pacify him. One of the frightened girls turned to Sister Lunar and said that they could not cope with Mrs. Beechin's tiger because it got out of her hands every time she left. The Moon Fairy insisted that it was their duty to protect the sacred animals, and therefore, if the Lady Saint found out that they had failed to cope with her pets, they would be in big trouble. The girl pacified the tiger, thinking at the same time that if the predator did not go wild, she would not be able to show her superiority over others. She was also glad that the Holy Lady would be absent for another whole month. During this time, the girl was going to catch the monster Wu Chang for Mrs. Wu in order to advance well up the career ladder in the long term. It was deep night. The chief constable announced to her subordinates that the purpose of their operation was to catch the unpredictable monster. She said that last night Constable Chow Mu saw the monster in the western prison, so everyone had to concentrate their search in the western part of the city. This meeting was over, so all the subordinates quickly went off to search. Chow. Of course, I also took part in this operation, and now I was leisurely walking through the dark streets of the city trying to find that very cat. Suddenly, right from his shadow, the shadow of the monster he was looking for began to appear. The shadow quickly transformed into a cute kitten who pounced on the main character as if he was very happy to see him. The guy began to stroke the animal while saying that ever since prison he had felt something's constant presence behind his back. For this kitten, he was like an endless ration. Also, Chow Mu admitted that this kitten reminded him of his sister Shui, who was much cuter than the clingy animal. He appeared from around the corner and upon seeing the guy, immediately asked what he did to you. Without waiting for an answer, she turned her attention to the kitten. The monster realized that he was in a dangerous situation, so he suddenly jumped up and quickly ran away, using his incredible abilities to do so. Chow Mu ran off to meet the animal, telling the chief constable that it was the same demon he had spoken of. The kitten was very fast and often changed direction, so our heroes could not determine which way he was running. Soon the constables stopped abruptly, having lost sight of their target, Chow Mu and Yin. He looked around intently trying to find the kitten, but all this was in vain. It seemed that he had managed to hide behind the walls of the large estate. The main character immediately thought that the kitten had brought them to this place on purpose, since he could have easily hidden from them in the first second of the chase. That's why the guy asked what kind of place it was. The chief constable said that it was the territory of the recently formed Crimson Waters bandits. The girl continued to tell that the leader of this gang was called Zhang Long. He was a sixth-class warrior, so he could not be underestimated. Suddenly, the main character was hit in the nose by a sharp, unpleasant smell that he did not expect to feel here at all. The guy, based on his experience, knew very well that it was a bloody stench, which aroused his serious suspicions. Not long before, the moon fairy Zhang Long arrived at the courtyard of the Crimson Waters and met her guest, and the Pope greeted the Lady Immortal. The man claimed that it was a great honor for him to serve Xiantian, which was one of the 10 great clans of immortals. He strongly desired to join this clan, so he was willing to do anything. The girl assured that Zhang Long would of course still have a chance to serve her, in exchange for which she would help him achieve his goal. However, the fairy warned that Zhang Long was not the only one who wanted to join the immortal clan, so first he would have to pass her test. Along the way, she took out a small bag. The girl wanted to see the man's level of combat skill, and for this she summoned a flying tiger. She asked him not to worry because it was not that difficult and should not have caused Zhang Long much trouble. The man, seeing the ferocious predator, immediately began to get very nervous and retreat back, not believing that he was about to fight him. The moon fairy asked if the leader of the Crimson Waters was scared, and added that he could always give up, forgetting about eternal life. Zhang Long quickly pulled himself together and prepared for battle, while saying that the girl had simply misunderstood him. In fact, he was supposedly only afraid that he would accidentally kill the tiger. Very soon, the wounded man lay in his own blood and begged the immortal lady for help, while the ferocious tiger prepared to deliver the final blow. The moon fairy, watching what was happening, calmly thought that the monster Wu Chang would definitely sense the energy of death and appear next to the dying sixth-class warrior. Still, the girl decided to leave Zhang Long alive for now, because if he died, the energy of death would quickly dissipate. The flying tiger did not agree with this at all, and he looked at the fairy with a fierce gaze as soon as he heard that she intended to stop him. The girl was very surprised, because usually after a bloody sacrifice the predator immediately calmed down. She assumed that Zhang Long's energy, on the contrary, heated up the tiger. At that very moment, behind her, the moon fairy heard the meowing of the very kitten that she so wanted to find. The girl was very happy about this and so quickly held out the bag and asked the kitten to climb into it. At that very moment, the flying tiger took off and headed towards the Wu Chang monster, which the fairy did not expect at all. The ferocious predator tried to attack the kitten, but he managed to dodge. After that, the chase began. What she saw made the moon fairy very nervous because the tiger went into berserker mode. She was afraid to even think about what would happen to her if they found out about it. The enraged tiger did not give up his attempts to catch the kitten, which attracted the attention of our heroes. Chao Mu and Yin He were shocked and couldn't believe that another demon had appeared in the city. Having quickly come to her senses, the chief constable quickly headed to the territory of the estate of the Crimson Waters gang, along the way asking the main character not to lag behind. The girl kicked the gates open with a powerful kick and walked onto the estate grounds. Seeing Zhang Long's bloody corpse, the constables realized they were too late. Chao Mu didn't understand what could have happened here. Yin He said that this tiger was raised by the Xiantian treasure. Sacred animals were usually controlled by people, so its owner had to be somewhere nearby. Chao Mu clarified whether the Xiantian clan was really behind all these murders. The main character never received an answer, because our hero's conversation was interrupted by the loud growl of a tiger that could be heard nearby. The ferocious predator is still chasing the kitten and was even able to knock him down. Luckily, the main character managed to react in time and quickly caught the kitten before it could crash to the ground. Chao Mu felt like he had proven himself to be a true hero by saving this kitten, which was great. However, the guy should not forget about the flying tiger, who now wanted to get not only the kitten, but also the person who intervened in this chase. He was already rushing to help the main character with lightning speed, using her incredible abilities for this purpose. The girl quickly grabbed Chao Mu, took him by the hand, and tried to lead him as far as possible from the attack of the bloodthirsty tiger. The chief constable claimed that the demon tiger was too strong, so they definitely couldn't fix it. She intended to distract the predator for a while the protagonist found reinforcements. Yin He, without asking for his opinion, threw the guy far to the side and asked him to hurry up. At that very moment, a flying tiger appeared behind the girl, who was not yet tired of this whole chase and was intent on profiting from another victim. The constable clearly saw that the sharp claws of the predator were quickly approaching her, but he did not have time to do anything about it. Yin He was momentarily overcome with a wild terror because she understood that her end had come. Unexpectedly, Chao Mu, shrouded in a mysterious aura, rushed past the girl and attacked the ferocious monster with all his might, throwing it far back. Turning back, the chief constable was surprised to find her subordinate asking her for forgiveness. The main character said with a smile on his face that he could not let the girl die instead of him. Yin. He was unhappy that the protagonist misheard her order, but Chao Mu believed that he was the one who should fight the tiger. At this time, someone was watching our heroes. It was Chu Xin, who thought the constables were crazy because they had time to escape. Now, in his opinion, they would definitely die here. The boy remembered that his master asked him to follow Chao Mu and Yin He and let him know if anything strange happens. The guard thought that it would be very bad if our heroes died here, but now he was worried about something even more important. The guy knew very well that the real criminal who was behind all the murders in the city was still here and watching what was happening. The Moon Fairy was very unhappy that the constables dared to stand in her way, but she was amazed by their thirst for death. The girl was sure that for the Flying Tiger, the sixth-class warriors were just a snack, and after eating he would definitely calm down. Chu Xin watched the fairies and thought that it was not in his majesty's interest to start a conflict with the immortals now, so he had no right to act impulsively. That is why the guard decided that for now, he would not interfere in what was happening and would wait for a suitable opportunity. Meanwhile, the fierce flying tiger rushed at the main character again and tried to attack him with its sharp claws, but then the guys managed to jump aside in time. Unfortunately for Chao, this attack did not go unnoticed. The monster still managed to get the guy and wound him. The main character could not help but recognize the strength of this enemy, because one blow from this bloodthirsty monster almost destroyed his energy barrier. The guy was already anticipating that if he died from the claws of this predator, his rating would be very high. So now, no matter how strange it sounded, he dreamed of being torn to pieces. The flying tiger seemed to understand what the main character wanted from him, and therefore prepared to deliver another crushing attack. Having concentrated the required amount of energy, the monster directed its rapid attack straight at the guy. Chao Mu saw the approach of danger beautifully, but he did not even think about avoiding it, and only mentally asked God to accept his mortal body. Suddenly, someone grabbed the main character tightly and began to quickly carry him away, which the guy did not expect at all. Yin He asked with displeasure why Chao Mu froze in place and asked him to dodge the attack. At this time, the guy mentally asked the girl to let him die in peace. The chief constable kept saying that the monster was too strong, and they wouldn't be able to stand up to it in a head-on collision, so she decided to use the shadow step technique. The girl said that to do this, it was necessary to direct your chi energy into your feet, thanks to which you could walk in the air as if on smooth ground. At the same time, it was necessary to twist the chi energy so as not to fall. Chao Mu, listening to all this, thought only about how to get out of Yin He's grip, because in his opinion, even the most brilliant student would not understand anything in such a situation. Suddenly, the main character noticed a system window that said that he had somehow managed to master Chao's shadow step technique. Mu couldn't believe it worked. Suddenly, the flying tiger struck again, causing the main character to fly off to the side. The chief constable decided it was time for her to act, so she quickly grabbed her sword. The girl dealt a sharp blow to her opponent in the hope that this would somehow stop him, but her weapon simply shattered into pieces. The chief constable was shocked and could not believe that the monster's internal energy was so strong that an ordinary blade was useless against it. The girl could dodge it with the help of Shadow Step for now, but she understood that it was impossible to defeat this monster, so if this continued, they would definitely die. The Moon Fairy, observing everything that was happening, it was believed that our heroes overestimated themselves because neither water, nor fire, nor weapons could injure the sacred animal. The girl smiled slyly and asked that the mortals simply accept the fact that they would be eaten, because for them it was even an honor. Meanwhile, Yin He found herself in a very dangerous situation. The flying tiger opened its mouth and quickly approached the girl, who could do nothing about it. Fortunately, at that very moment, the loading of the Shadow Step skill was already completed, thanks to which the main character was able to quickly go to help his partner. The head constable saw that Chao Mu quickly walked towards her with a smile on his face, which made her very unhappy. The girl demanded that the guy quickly run away from here because she believed that he would definitely not be able to defeat this monster. The flying tiger saw another of its victims and decided to attack him with several destructive streams of energy at once. Despite this, Chao Mu continued to confidently run forward because he had 204 available skill points, while the Shadow Step skill only required 126 points. The guy decided that it was time to take advantage of the opportunity to redirect skill points, and so he was able to push off the ground sharply and jump high into the air. The next moment, the protagonist fearlessly jumped on the flying tiger and with his powerful blow, literally pinned it to the ground. The chief constable was very surprised by what she saw, because she did not expect such a thing from her subordinate. Chushin also continued to watch what was happening without taking his eyes off it, as if he didn't believe that all of this was real. The guy knew for sure that this blow was much stronger than the abilities of a 6th-class warrior could allow, so he assumed that the main character combined the technique with fast movements in order to further increase the damage. The guard did not understand at all who Chao was. If only he could fight without paying any attention to his physical condition. He watched the protagonist and didn't believe that her inherited technique had always been like this. The girl was surprised that the guy used steps intended for stealth movement in order to carry out furious attacks. After several successful attacks, the protagonist finally drew his sword to finally kill the ferocious monster. Then, as if from nowhere, a moon fairy appeared and loudly demanded that Xiao Mu stopped. She began to say that this flying tiger was the spirit pet of the Xiantian clan elder, so the constables should immediately hand it over to her. The protagonist looked at the fairy with an indifferent gaze and said that he didn't care about the Immortal clan. Now he was only worried about the fact that the terrible monster had taken many innocent lives. The next moment, Xiao Mu loudly declared that according to the law of the empire, he was sentencing the monster to death, and then dealt a crushing blow. Chushin, seeing all this, could not believe that the guy had killed the sacred animal so easily. He did not understand why some warrior allowed himself to do something that even the emperor did not dare to do. At the same time, the moon fairy was shocked by what had happened, because she already understood what problems awaited her ahead. After this, the main character said that the immediate killer was punished, but this was not the end of this matter. The guy pointed his sword at the fairy and continued to say that the one who controlled the monster and incited him to bloodthirsty deeds also had to pay for his crime with his life. The girl's eyes immediately filled with fear for her life. She already understood that she would not be able to leave here so easily. The moon fairy, having heard the threats of the protagonist, immediately declared that the pathetic man had no right to interfere in the affairs of immortals and added that his words were slander. The chief constable intervened in this conversation and asked what the moon fairy was doing here if everything said above was slander. With obvious suspicion, Yinny continued to ask whether the girl wanted to catch the monster or feed it human flesh. Responded very emotionally that she should not have to justify herself to mortals who not only obeyed her order but also killed a sacred animal. Then the girl flew into the sky on her paper bird, threatening in the end that our heroes would still pay for what they had done. The chief constable, looking after the scoundrel, hoped that someday the immortals would also be brought to justice. Just at that moment, the main character fell to the ground with a crash because he was completely exhausted after the battle with the ferocious monster. This greatly frightened the girl. He asked if it was with Xiao Mu is okay and promised that she will do everything to save him. At the same time, the boy begged the chief constable not to save him, after which he finally died. The next day came. Monster Wuchang sat carefree on a tree and watched as the city and its inhabitants woke up. The kitten was very pleased and thought about what pure energy of death that constable had. Now his stomach was literally bursting with pleasure. The animal literally adored the main character because on top of everything else, he even saved him. The kitten felt very sorry that the white tiger had seriously injured Xiao Mu, from which he died without having time to receive the necessary help. The monster was very upset by the fact that he could only feed on the energy of death, and as soon as he laid eyes on someone, he soon died. It seemed that the kitten was destined to be a loner all his life. Suddenly, something quickly flew past the monster and fell to the ground with a crash which really scared the kitten. It turned out that Xiao Mu had already been reborn, but this time not in a very good place. The kitten was very surprised that the guy was still alive. Without wasting any time, the joyful monster rushed towards the main character to hug him. Xiao Mu was surprised to see this kitten next to him again, and so he asked if it was not going to leave him. Still, the guy decided that from now on, this monster would be his pet. After that, Xiao Mu checked his mortality rating and found that he only received a B+ rating. The main character did not understand why his rating was so low, because everything that happened last night was undoubtedly a very heroic story. Unexpectedly, the guy guessed that someone deliberately did not allow the information to spread, probably because the state chamber did not want to go against the Xiantian clan. Also, now the guy was interested in why every time he perfected the immortal fist, his lifespan increased, but his appearance had not changed for a long time. Chow Mu. He assumed that he had already reached balance, and now he was wondering how much longer he had left to live. After that, the protagonist decided to set out on a journey. He was no longer a constable, so he wanted to change his clothes and try to punish the criminal from the Xiantian clan. Soon the main character, as planned, arrived at the Xiantian clan's estate, which was also a temple of immortals. Now Chow Mu knew where the Chow family used to live and was surprised that there were many pilgrims there. Suddenly the guy heard someone asking for help very emotionally. The elderly woman said that a few days ago her son and daughter-in-law were killed by a monster. That day her granddaughter hid in the closet, but the experience drove her crazy, so her grandmother begged her to cure her, promising to burn incense every day for this. One of the temple ministers asked the old woman not to make so much noise, because a fifth-rank official was praying now. He also said that the grandmother should go to the end of the line and not disturb him. An official praying in the temple, asking God to grant a son to his ninth concubine. Despite the refusal, the elderly woman fell to her knees and continued to beg for help because they could not wait any longer. This made the man very angry. The moon fairy intervened in this conversation and asked the temple listener not to rush to drive away this old woman and her granddaughter. The girl turned to the elderly woman and asked if her granddaughter had really seen her son killed by a monster. The old woman confirmed this and added that the girl lost consciousness from shock and woke up only in the morning, but since then she has not reacted to anything. The elderly woman even suggested that her granddaughter's soul was eaten by a monster because she looked completely emotionless. The insidious moon fairy looked closely at the girl and did not deny it at all. Still, the girl asked the old woman to follow her with the child and promised that she would take care of the treatment. The elderly woman was very grateful to the immortal lady. Suddenly, someone blocked the old woman's path and asked her not to listen to the moon fairy. Next, Chow Mu superbly stated that it was this girl who allowed all these murders to happen. These words shocked the moon fairy with their suddenness. Turning back, the girl found the main character in front of her with horror. She did not understand why he was safe and sound and what he needed here. Chow said Mu quickly spread across the lips of the pilgrims, who immediately began to discuss what they had heard and closely observe what was happening. Not everyone believed that these words were true. The moon fairy remained calm and said that as a civil servant, Constable Chow Mu should have acted officially and not accused her of murder without evidence. People agreed that the constable had no right to accuse someone without evidence, because even the emperor could not allow himself to do such a thing. The girl continued to loudly say that the main character accused her of such a terrible crime because there were disagreements between them in the past. She also claimed that the boy had broken the law when he entered the immortal's abode without permission and tried to ruin the reputation of his clan. For this, she intended to punish him. Chow Mu. He understood that he was really at a disadvantage, so he just silently looked at the moon fairy and prepared for battle. Suddenly, a little girl who seemed to have lost her mind pointed at the moon fairy and loudly declared that it was she. The child, with fear in her eyes, said that the girl brought a white tiger that brutally killed her mother and father. The elderly woman was incredibly happy that her granddaughter had come to her senses and believed that now everything would be fine, but the girl continued to scream loudly in fear, remembering what had happened. What they heard amazed the pilgrims. Everyone knew that the Xiantian clan had sacred animals, so they did not deny that the moon fairy could release a monster to hunt people. Because of all this, the girl began to get very nervous, and in order to calm the crowd, she even used her abilities, demanding silence from people. Asked with displeasure how mortals dared to accuse an immortal, and assumed that they wanted to say goodbye to their lives. Also, the moon fairy said that Chow, the man who caused all this commotion, had to pay with his life, so he won't leave here peacefully. The main character calmly responded to these words and replied that he was not a civil servant because he was Chow's brother, Mu, and not to them themselves. Chow Pifu bared his spear while saying that human laws could not cope with the immortal. That's why the guy intended to do everything himself with his weapon. The protagonist fearlessly rushed into the attack, which momentarily discouraged the moon fairy. At that very moment, one of the temple servants appeared between the girl and the sharp spear, and very skillfully blocked Chow's attack. Pifu. The man looked the boy straight in the eye menacingly, and calling him a scoundrel, asked how he dared to attack his older sister. The man threatened to chop the main character into pieces, and then began to inflict numerous blows on Chow. Pifu was ready to accept this challenge and intended to see what the Xiantian clan was capable of. Suddenly, the guy realized that his opponent used fencing, which meant he was a master of martial arts. It was unclear why he became a lackey of the immortals. The man immediately stated that martial arts masters were mortals, but in the Xiantian clan, he could achieve immortality. The temple servant gathered all his strength and was ready to kill Chow. Pifu right now thought that this would increase his reputation, and then the elder would allow him into the inner part of the clan. Unfortunately for the man, he never had time to use his technique, Great Law of Retribution of the Demons of Heaven, because a powerful attack performed by the main character suddenly overtook him. This one blow alone made the villain fly far back without even having time to realize what had happened to him. As a result, the temple listener crashed into the wall with a bang and now no longer posed any danger to the main character. After that, Xiao Pifu confidently replied that he already knew perfectly well about the technique, the great law of dispersing the demons of heaven, without the help of the scoundrel. Suddenly, the main character's attention was drawn to a small piece of paper on which mysterious symbols were depicted. He quickly approached him from behind. It turned out that this seal was sent by the Moon Fairy, who was now asking Xiao with madness in her eyes, "Pifo, die." After that, the villain quickly activated the seal, causing a raging flame to appear around her. The scorching fire instantly headed towards the main character, who had never seen anything like it before. A few seconds, Xiao Pifu simply watched what was happening, not understanding what he should do in this situation. Finally, the guy came to his senses and began to quickly run away, but the fire was already breathing down his neck. In all this turmoil, the main character even forgot about her spear, which quickly melted under the influence of an unusual flame. Xiao Pifu couldn't believe that his weapon melted in a matter of seconds and assumed that this was the power of the immortal techniques. Suddenly, the guy felt pain in his left hand. Looking at it, he saw that his hand was burning, which discouraged him. The guy realized that the attack of the Moon Fairy had finally caught up with him, which meant that now he was in trouble. The next moment, a raging flame completely engulfed Xiao's hand. Pifu and began to live mercilessly, bringing incredible pain to the main character. Watching this, the Moon Fairy laughed loudly and said that it was a bone-corroding talisman given to her by the elder. Its flame destroyed the soul and burned the bones, condemning a person to hellish torment. Also, the girl with admiration, which limited with madness, said that this fire will not stop burning until it turns the main character into ashes. This was his punishment for standing in the way of the immortal. Taking a confident step forward, Xiao Pifu asked the girl if this flame was really unquenchable. The guy, filled with rage, was not at all against what this fire was saying, and believed that the Moon Fairy would die today anyway. Seeing this, the girl began to get nervous and call the main character a madman, while asking why he couldn't calm down. Xiao Pifu. He replied that the reason was that the immortal had committed so many atrocities that she had become even worse than a real demon. Clenching his fist tightly, the boy swore that even if he died, he would still prove that there was still justice in this world. The next moment, enveloped in an unquenchable flame, the protagonist fearlessly rushed at the Moon Fairy in order to grab her. The raging flame quickly spread to the girl and began to severely burn her body, causing incredible pain. The Moon Fairy believed that this was simply impossible because she was immortal and could not die at the hands of a pathetic mortal. The wretch looked at the top of the high mountain and mentally asked her older brothers and sisters if they would come down to help her. In the end, the Moon Fairy fell to the ground, exhausted, and showed no signs of life as Xiao watched closely. Pifu. After that, the main character thought that he had made the right decision when he spent all his skill points on the immortal fist. Otherwise, he would definitely not have survived this flame. However, the main character's body was still badly damaged, but despite this, it was worth it to stop the villain. Xiao Pifu was glad that the Moon Fairy could no longer harm this granny and her granddaughter. Besides, the guy believed that people serve legends about today because he killed an immortal. Also, the main character thought that death by fire was incredibly beautiful, so the rating of his death had to be very high. Suddenly, something quickly flew past Xiao Pifu, simultaneously chopping off his burning hand. Having encountered a low stone fence on his way, the sharp sword stuck into it with a ringing sound. At the same time, the square in front of the temple was filled with the frantic screams of the main character, who could hardly bear the pain after his hand was cut off. People were shocked by what they saw, and were already afraid that the Xiantian clan had come to take revenge on their hero. Suddenly, someone from the crowd noticed that the flames around the guy had disappeared, and they thought that this was a real blessing from heaven. All the pilgrims noticed that the flames around the guy disappeared, and thought that this was a real blessing from heaven. Xiao Mu, he understood that the fire was stopped not by his pious act, but by the sword, which instantly cut off his burning hand. That is why the main character assumed that whoever did this was trying to save him and not cripple him. However, the guy was not at all happy about this, because now his whole body was covered in burns, and therefore it would be better for him to die, and why be reborn again. Next, Chow Mu turned to the people and asked that one of them lend him a pair of pants. Many people showed their respect for the hero and wanted to fulfill his request. After this, the main character asked the pilgrims to quickly run away from here, because he believed that the Xiantian clan would not simply leave what happened here. Soon Chow Mu was left completely alone, so he loudly addressed someone and asked that this person show himself to him. The guy, hiding his displeasure, turned to the one to whom he owed his life with a feigned smile, because he knew for sure that this person was somewhere nearby. Chu Xin, seeing this, told his master that his order did not make the main character very happy. The man was surprised by this and believed that Chow Pifu was as unpredictable as his brother Chow Mu. The emperor still couldn't believe that the boy was risking his own life to fight the immortal. Meanwhile, Chow Mu continued to ask for his savior to come out to him. Chu Xin bowed before his master and reminded him that he had said that he was unworthy of calling himself the Son of Heaven, since a common man could administer justice and he could not. The guy always understood the man's situation and believed in his farsightedness. The guard believed that the emperor did the right thing when he did not allow himself to act impulsively. The man will answer that in fact, he would like to act freely just like the main character. Then he asked that the subordinate take Chow Mu and took him away from here without attracting attention. At that moment, the emperor, who was hiding his identity and his guard, heard a loud gust of wind that was completely unnatural. They did not immediately understand what it was, but very soon they realized the situation they found themselves in. The discouraged Chu Xin said that it was already too late, because the fact that the moon fairy died at the hands of a mortal could not be hidden for long. At this time, one of the men who was carefreely playing a board game said that Fairy herself was to blame for what happened, but she brought shame on the entire Xiantian clan. He was also not at all happy that Qi Yan, who was responsible for the temple this year, is now wandering somewhere, so they will have to deal with everything. The second guy agreed with his interlocutor and believed that if they didn't deal with Chow, then the offerings from pilgrims could have significantly decreased. Suddenly, the same guy suggested that they wouldn't have to fuss after all. He was prompted to this thought by a familiar bright light that lit up on the top of a high mountain. The interlocutors believed that someone had already found out about everything because the bone-eating talisman had been used. Meanwhile, the main character watched as a girl was approaching him in the sky. She easily balanced on a large sword that served as her means of transportation. Xiantian clan elder named Wu Bi-chin spoke rudely to Chow Mu, asked who he was. Guys, he knew what kind of woman it was, but he replied that he was a seeker of truth and justice, so he was very interested in who he was talking to now. The arrogant girl had no intention of meeting the main character and called the whole situation boring. As she prepared to use her abilities, the clan elder calmly continued to say that the immortal was right even when he was wrong. The next moment, Chow Mu was once again engulfed in raging flames, something the guy didn't expect at all. The unquenchable fire burned the main character, causing him incredible pain. However, Chow Mu was delighted because this flame was 10 times more powerful than the moon fairies, which meant that he would still be able to die today. The protagonist loudly suggested to the elder of the Xiantian clan to see if the heavens would like such a sacrifice. Meanwhile, Wu Bi-chin was wondering if the martial arts masters were so desperate that they sent a boy of only 6th grade to the immortals. The girl was also surprised by the fact that just recently she felt someone's presence nearby, but now there was no one there. In the end, the clan elder decided not to waste her time on this any longer and quickly flew away to do her business. After some time, the monster Wu Chang was already receiving attention from his master and was thinking about how lucky he was that the guy could be reborn endlessly. Chow Mu was a little unhappy that the kitten only drew death energies from him and asked that he at least sometimes help him in battle. Looking at his system characteristics, the guy found that he had already reached the 4th grade and would soon be able to begin cultivating immortality. For this, he had the skills of the Fist of Immortality and the Immortal Path of the Immaculate Yang. The main character then suggested that the elder of the Xiantian clan was somehow connected with the world of martial arts, and the association used the martial art technique of Lin Shi. Chow Mu decided to use his abilities to track the girl, assuming that he might be able to find a continuation of the Fist of Immortality technique. Soon the boy found the clan elder in her dwelling on the spiritual lake. Wu Bi-chin seemed to sense that someone was watching her right now, so she decided that there was a traitor in the association. Another service was being held in the mountain temple of Saint Bi-chin. Quiet prayers were heard in the incense-filled room. People lit incense in honor of the merciful lady and asked that her blessing come with them, relieving them of illness and protecting them from evil spirits. The energy from these prayers was directed straight toward the Xiantian clan elder, however. She was still dissatisfied. This energy was not enough because if the girl wanted to break through even higher, she needed much more grace. Suddenly, the clan elder felt that there was someone else nearby, which caused her to instantly switch her attention. As it turned out, late at night, someone really did quietly sneak into the territory of the immortal lady's abode. Chow Mu did not expect at all that the elder of the clan life would be in such an unsightly place, but seeing a group of slaves at the gate, he immediately suspected that the girl was not so merciful. Suddenly, the girl who was taken hostage by the main character began to beg for mercy and ask him to direct his anger at the clan elder and not at her. The guy decided to take advantage of the girl's fear and demanded that she answer his questions honestly, otherwise he would have to take her with him. The girl agreed and promised that if the main character spared her, her father would arrange a generous memorial ritual for him. First of all, Chow Mu asked where the clan elder came from. The girl said that the elder had previously been a student of a martial arts master nicknamed the Righteous Warrior, whose real name was Wu Chin Sun. 40 years ago, he was defeated by an immortal, after which he joined a certain criminal group and went into hiding. Even the elders of the Xiantian clan could not find him. Wu Biqin joined Xiantian about 10 years ago. As a result, the elders chose her as a worthy example of rebirth from a warrior to a cultivator. The girl continued to tell with admiration that since then more and more people began to join their clan. Now the main character understood why some warriors were ready to humiliate themselves before the immortals. Despite the fact that cultivation was a very complex process, accessible to far from everyone. The guy then thought that since Wu Biqin had only joined the clan 10 years ago, she was unlikely to have anything to do with the destruction of the Chow family, which meant she knew nothing about the Fist of Immortality. After that, the main character asked the girl how much she knew about martial arts. I assumed that Wu Biqin could teach her something. The girl replied that she was not yet worthy of the mistress devoting time to her, so for now she only took care of the pets and provided for their daily needs, including food, water, and sleep. Then Chow Mu asked how strong Wu Biqin was, and the girl replied with admiration that the lady was incredibly talented, and that just a little bit more and she would be able to achieve true immortality. Suddenly, the main character, noticing the danger, abruptly grabbed the girl by the hand, not letting her finish speaking. The next moment, a huge explosion thundered, causing Chow Mu still managed to save the innocent girl. A silhouette of a girl he already knew appeared in front of the main character. The cold-blooded Wu Biqin, preparing to use her abilities once again, ordered her subordinate to remain silent. The protagonist could not believe that the elder of the Xiantian clan considered people to be bugs, because she had just literally almost turned an innocent girl into ashes. Wu Biqin was very surprised to see the guy in front of her, because she remembered well that she had burned him just recently. Chow Mu understood that he had to come up with a story again and tell it in such a way that his opponent would believe him. The guy said his name was Chao Zong, and he was the brother of the burned Chao Pifu. Their honest and devoted family devoted themselves to forget about their native country, so he intended to take revenge on the girl for the murdered relative. Without saying a word, Wu Biqin once again used her abilities and caused a huge explosion from which the main character had to quickly run away. The guy realized that he needed to hold out as long as possible to get more information out of the elder, so he began to say that he was just joking. He said that, like the girl, he was from the world of martial arts. Wu Biqin immediately assumed that the guy was sent to her by a righteous warrior, so she intended to kill him right now. Chao Zong replied that he had no idea who the girl was talking about and did not understand why she assumed that he was somehow connected with this righteous warrior. Without waiting for an answer, the guy assumed that this was due to the fact that he and Wu Biqin both practiced similar martial techniques with a cultivation effect. Xiantian clan elder did not respond to this, but thought for a moment. It seemed that Chao Zong everything went according to his plan. This silence made the guy understand that he was right, so he allowed himself to clarify whether Wu had taught the girl her technique. Chin Sin, but she betrayed him in order to take the technique for herself. These words had a noticeable effect on the Xiantian clan elder and made him remember the past with sadness. The unexpected girl took out her sword and said that on that day, Chao Pifu was saved by the emperor's guard, so she asked if Chao Zong also worked for him. The main character was very surprised by what he heard, because he did not understand what the reason for this act was, because they were not connected with him in any way. Continuing to threaten the guy with the talisman, Wu Biqin demanded that he confess where Emperor Chao was now. Zong insisted that he never saw him in person again. Having heard this answer, the girl decided that she no longer needed the main character, so she instantly directed the talisman of inexhaustible flame at him. Chao Mu had to quickly use his abilities and run away from this attack, while thinking that he would not be able to learn anything more from the elder of the Immortal clan. Unexpectedly, the main character was attacked from behind by Wu Bichin's subordinate, who could not allow him to simply escape. Chao Zong was very surprised by this because he did not expect at all that he would receive a blow from her. Looking the guy straight in the eyes, the girl only briefly asked him for forgiveness. At that very moment, a talisman clung to the main character, which marked the end for another of his clones. The next moment, the main character's body was engulfed in a raging flame that began to burn him to ashes. In the end, the boy fell to the ground without strength. Only after Chao, there was nothing left for Zona. The fire began to die down little by little. Meanwhile, the girl, kneeling, asked her mistress for forgiveness and promised that she would ask her father to build several more temples in her honor. Ubitsin coldly demanded that the girl know her place. She also threatened that if the girl opened her mouth again, she would burn out her entire family. The unfortunate girl had no choice but to submit to her evil mistress. After some time, Ubichin used her abilities to contact Elder Song and told him that she had been attacked by someone connected to the emperor. The voice on the other side accepted this information but asked that the girl not be distracted from her cultivation. Jiantian had been looking for the emperor for a long time, so the girl believed that her information would be very useful for the clan, and perhaps she would even be able to get hold of potions that helped in cultivation. Wu Bichin did all this because she wanted to become stronger. She already anticipated that one day she would be able to achieve true immortality. It was late evening. At this time, some establishments were just starting their work. Someone was loudly telling the story of how Chao Pif was consumed by the fires of hell, but heaven blessed him to come out of it alive. Everyone was delighted with this story. Chao Mu was also in this establishment and considered it a real blessing to drink tea while listening to stories about his own coolness. However, he was not at all pleased that for such a horrible death as being burned alive, he received a very low mortality rating. The guy then thought about the fact that despite the fact that Wu Bichin had joined the Immortal clan, she was clearly still afraid of her former teacher. The protagonist even assumed that the righteous warrior himself sent the girl to the Xiantian clan as a spy, but she tried to escape from his control. Suddenly, the main character began to experience strange sensations that he had not felt before. Somehow, he knew very well that the city was full of martial arts masters. Among the Nanju mountain ranges, the main building of the Xiantian clan was located, and despite the late hour, work was still in full swing. Several elders of the clan gathered together to discuss the latest news. Elder Song told everyone present that, according to Wu Bichin, the emperor had appeared in Heian Prefecture. Elder Tianxin, hearing this, was very happy because he thought that now their plan would finally come into action. Master Qi Yan reminded everyone that according to the agreement, in half a month the emperor would have to climb Qinmen Peak under the guise of a wanderer and bow before the immortals, but recently nothing had been heard about him. Elder Song was unhappy that the emperor, despite the help of their leader, dared to send his man to save a mortal who invaded their temple. Elder Tianxing was also unhappy that the emperor was plotting against the immortals, who had reigned in the heavens for centuries, and who had managed to destroy the last elite warriors of the empire 40 years ago. Master Qin Yang, who had been silent until now, suddenly said that the cultivators probably shouldn't have interfered with the emperor's fate, since his blessing was bestowed by the highest heavens. Elder Song then insisted that they were not trying to take the throne from the emperor, but only wanted to seize all the world's resources and increase the flow of grace and offerings. That is why the wily old man believed that they should control the emperor of mortals and not become him. Elder Tianxin was confident that in half a month the emperor would bow before them, and then their clan would become the first clan of immortals that would lead the rest. Elder Song agreed with this, but he believed that it was also not worth conflicting with the emperor, and instead, it was necessary to throw him a treat in the form of Wu Bichin. Master Qiyan was very surprised by what he heard and seriously worried. He asked what the old man meant. The older man explained that before this, they had only used the girl as bait for Wu Qinshina. However, the righteous warrior had not shown himself after so many years, so the Xiantian clan no longer had any reason to keep her around. The next day came and Chushin reported to the emperor that he had conducted an investigation and found out that Chao Pifu had no connection with the once exterminated Chao family of Heian province. In addition, the guy learned that not long ago in the city of Yancheng, a father and sons with the surname Chao were proclaimed heroes. They all did not possess the technique of the great law of disintegration of the heavenly demons. The emperor was surprised by this because he knew that this was a technique that destroyed the body and was a direct path to the extinction of the race. Suddenly, Chushin felt as if lightning had struck him, realizing that something was wrong. Raising his head up, the alarm boy loudly warned his master that something was approaching them. Very soon, a mysterious man landed nearby, who clearly did not come to bring good news. It turned out that it was Master Qi. Yanhe introduced himself and greeted the emperor. The emperor immediately rose to his feet and, remaining calm, approached the Immortal. The first thing the man asked was what brought the Immortal from the Xiantian clan here, while thinking about how he was able to find him here. Master Qi Yan. He said that he came to hurry the emperor, because in just half a month he was supposed to appear at Qinmen Peak. The Immortal also said with a sly smile that yesterday some mortal had invaded the Xiantian temple. The emperor's subordinate was also involved in this matter. Hearing this, the man noticeably tensed up because he didn't know what he should expect from the Immortal standing in front of him. Chushin also became nervous. He didn't understand how his presence could be revealed since he was using a blade without any identifying marks. He suddenly remembered that Wu Biqin was a martial artist before, so she probably knew the winged fish throwing technique. The emperor admitted that he had been careless in giving such an order and assumed that the Xiantian clan would now use this fact to blackmail him. The man did not understand how he could now avoid worshipping the immortals, but he still began to try to justify himself. Unexpectedly, Master Qi Yan interrupted the emperor and stated that the blame for yesterday's incident lay entirely with Saintess Wu Biqin and her subordinate Moon Fairy. The Immortal continued to say that this was precisely why the Xiantian clan decided to strip Wu Biqin of her title and expel her from Heian province. The emperor was very surprised by what he heard, because he had never expected such an outcome. The man couldn't believe that even one clan of immortals cared about justice and thought that they were achieving something in this way. Next, Master Qi Yan. He said that the issue was resolved and therefore it was time for him to return to other matters. Finally, the Immortal wished to meet the Emperor again in half a month at Qinmen Peak. After that, Master Qi Yan flew high into the sky and disappeared into the clouds. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, someone was running quickly across the rooftops of a building as if trying to escape pursuit. Suddenly, the man stopped abruptly, as if he no longer wanted to run away. The young man quickly grabbed his sword and loudly asked who was chasing him. Along the way, he threatened to kill the pursuer if he did not show up. The pursuer still had to show himself, but he insisted that he had no bad intentions. The main character introduced himself, gave his next name, and said that he had heard dry rumors that his interlocutor was the best informant in this city. Hearing the guy's name, Jiang Chun asked with admiration if he was from the Chao family, and said that he was in Yancheng City when the guy's relatives accomplished their great feats. Jiang Chun continued to say that from then on he spread the fame of the Chao family throughout the world and inspired people to resist the immortal tyrants. The guy then said that he was not an easy narrator of Chao's story. Mu did not argue with this, because his interlocutor had not only a sword in his hands, but also honed techniques. Jiang Chun admitted without any hesitation that he was a follower of Ting Chao Tower. After what was said, there was absolute silence. It seemed that the main character was so surprised by what he heard that he could not say a word. Finally, he asked what tower the guy Jiang Chun was talking about. He was not at all surprised that his interlocutor had not heard anything about it. Then he said that it was a fighting clan that had survived the massacre of the Immortals, and their leader was a great sage who had collected knowledge from all corners of the martial arts world. Chao Mu was not at all impressed by this story and assumed that these representatives of this clan were some kind of scouts. Jiang Chun did not deny this. The guy then regretfully said that recently their clan had slipped downhill due to the compilation of absurd ratings like the main beauties of the empire or the worst scandals of the year, which ruined their reputation. To Chao's surprise, Mu was very eager to know more about these rankings, which momentarily discouraged Jiang Chun. The guy also said that recently the Wuji Association announced the recruitment of warriors who were ready to kill on command. For successfully completed tasks, the warriors were promised techniques from the warrior guide himself, which Chao simply could not ignore. Mu, the first target of the association, was the leader who joined the Xiantian clan. Of course, it was about Saint Wu Biqin. Hearing this, the main character immediately jumped up and ran somewhere, thanking Jiang Chen one last time and promising to treat him to tea someday. Now the guy understood why so many martial arts masters had suddenly appeared in the city. Now Chao Mu wanted to kill Wu Biqin, because he thought that then he might be able to obtain the remaining part of the Fist of Immortality skill and even joined the association.